Greetings, dear subscribers and casual visitors to my channel. Many perceive Harry Potter as a children's story that gradually becomes darker towards the finale, and indeed, an entire generation grew up with this saga, watching as the young wizard matures and faces increasingly serious challenges. But when you reread the books as an adult, you start seeing something new. Hidden within the pages are dark moments that likely went unnoticed in childhood. Today, we will delve into a few of them. Number 1. Dolores Umbridge and the Centaurs, the unspoken horror. Dolores Umbridge became one of the most hated characters in the Order of the Phoenix. Her arrival at Hogwarts, her transformation into a dictator, and her complete impunity infuriated not only the students, but also the readers. However, her punishment turned out to be far worse than mere expulsion. The Centaurs dragged Umbridge deep into the Forbidden Forest, and while the movies barely touched on this, the books provide plenty of hints. In mythology, centaurs are known for their harsh nature and not-so-friendly attitude toward women. Umbridge returned alive but deeply traumatized. What does that imply? I think many can guess for themselves. Number 2. The Dursleys, victims of a horcrux. It's hard to sympathize with the Dursleys. They treated Harry worse than a pet, forcing him to live in a cupboard. However, a theory offers an alternative explanation. It's known that horcruxes have a toxic influence on those around them, bringing out their darkest traits. What if the Dursleys simply couldn't resist this effect? Harry, being a horcrux, spent 10 years with them, enough time to make them cruel and bitter.
Number 3. Love potions, a magical weapon.
The wizarding world is filled with details that seem contradictory upon closer examination. For example, the Imperious Curse is classified as unforgivable since it completely overrides a person's will. However, love potions, which have a similar effect, are freely available. Consider the story of Merope Gaunt, Tom Riddle's mother. She used a love potion to keep Voldemort's father infatuated with her. But from a real-world perspective, this is nothing short of forced coercion. Number 4. Lies and deception in the wizarding world. At first glance, the magical world seems fairer and more honest than the Muggle world. But upon closer inspection, deception is everywhere. Fake galleons, Polyjuice Potion that allows people to impersonate others, and an imperfect trace system for underage wizards all create opportunities for dark schemes. The books don't focus much on this, but adult readers can easily see how such magic could be misused. Number 5. Slytherin, truly an evil house? Since Hogwarts' founding, Slytherin has had the reputation of producing dark wizards. Its students are ambitious, cunning, and willing to do whatever it takes to achieve their goals. But if you look at it from another perspective, are they really to blame? The other 3 houses have always kept their distance, labeling Slytherins as the bad guys. Imagine being judged before you even have a chance to prove yourself. Is it any wonder that some eventually live up to those expectations? Number 6. The Marauder's Map, a tool for stalking. At first glance, the Marauder's Map is a harmless, magical artifact that helps navigate the castle. But if you think about it, its existence raises serious privacy concerns. With it, one can track any student, know exactly where they are, and even see who is sneaking off together to a secluded spot in Hogwarts. In the wrong hands, such a map becomes a tool for stalking and manipulation.
A fun fact, in the credits of The Prisoner of Azkaban, you can spot 2 pairs of footprints positioned rather suggestively. Coincidence?
Number 7. Hogwarts, one of the most dangerous schools. Every child who read Harry Potter dreamed of receiving a letter from Hogwarts. But, from a parent's perspective, the excitement quickly fades. The school is home to giant magical creatures, hidden corridors with deadly traps, and a sport, Quidditch, where players risk being hit by a metal ball or falling from great heights. And this is just Harry's first year at school. Moaning, Myrtle and Cedric Diggory are official victims of Hogwarts, but could there have been more cases like theirs, ones that were simply covered up? Number 8. Neville's parents, a fate worse than death. Neville Longbottom never talked about his parents. People assumed they were dead. Another tragedy of the war. Another child left behind. But the truth was worse. Frank and Alice Longbottom had fought bravely. They had stood against Voldemort, and after his fall they had paid the price. Bellatrix Lestrange and her followers had tortured them for information they did not have. They had used the Cruciatus curse until their minds shattered. They did not die, they were left breathing but empty. Trapped in St. Mungo's, unable to recognize their son. A fate worse than death. Neville visited them. He sat by their beds talking to people who could not answer. He watched his mother shuffle toward him, silent, eyes vacant. She pressed a Drubal's best blowing gum wrapper into his hand. It meant nothing to her. It meant everything to him. She gives me one every time I come, he said quietly.
Luna Lovegood understood. It's like having a friend who's gone away but still in the world, she said. But it was worse than that. They had not gone away. They were right there. But they would never come back.
People whispered about Neville, how he fumbled spells, how he never quite fit in. They did not know how heavy his burden was. They did not know that every time he looked at his parents, he saw what the war had stolen from him. Number 9. Death Eaters in the Ministry. Voldemort didn't need an army to take power. He needed the Ministry, and he got it. Even during his first rise, his influence was everywhere. High-ranking officials whispered his name in secret meetings, laws bent in his favor. The Ministry is ignoring it, as usual, Arthur Weasley said, long before the war began, because fear had already taken hold. Some joined him willingly. Lucius Malfoy walked the halls of power with his head held high. He didn't need to cast the Imperious Curse. Gold and influence worked just as well. He controlled Fudge like a puppet. You have no proof, Fudge snapped when told that Voldemort had returned. He was too afraid to believe it. Then the war came again, and this time there was no hiding. The Ministry fell. Magic is might, the new statue read, a twisted parody of power. The old officials were gone. The new ones wore black robes and silver masks. They didn't need Dementors in Azkaban anymore. They created new prisons, underground cells where the accused waited for trials that never came. You have stolen magic, Umbridge told a crying Muggle-born. You must be punished. Her smile never wavered. Propaganda flooded the streets. The Daily Prophet turned into a weapon. Harry was undesirable number 1. People whispered in fear. They turned on each other. Informants were rewarded. Rebels vanished. Dolores Umbridge thrived. She didn't need the dark mark. She needed permission. And she got it. The Ministry has fallen, Kingsley's Patronus warned. But by then, everyone already knew. Number 10. Wizards make terrible parents. The wizarding world is full of terrible parents. Some are cruel, some are distant, some destroy their children without even realizing it. Lucius and Narcissa Malfoy loved Draco. But their love came with conditions. He was not allowed to be weak, not allowed to fail, not allowed to be anything less than perfect. You will do as the Dark Lord wishes, Lucius commanded. Draco was 16 when he was given a mission that should have never been his. Kill Dumbledore or die trying. He never had a choice. His parents had already made it for him. Barty Crouch Sr. never lifted a hand against his son. He didn't have to. Coldness did the job for him. Barty Jr. was brilliant, but he was never enough, not obedient enough, not disciplined enough. His father's love was a thing that had to be earned, and he failed. "My son has been brought up to know what is right," Crouch Sr. declared. But did he? Or had he only been taught fear? When Barty Jr. was caught among Death Eaters, his father didn't ask why, didn't try to save him. "You are no son of mine," he said. And so Barty Jr. became exactly what he had been accused of being. Tom Riddle Sr. had no love for his son, no interest, no attachment. He never even met him. He had been tricked, yes. But when he found out, he didn't seek the truth. He simply left. If he had stayed, if he had raised his child, would the world have known Lord Voldemort? Number 11, Dumbledore's manipulations.
Albus Dumbledore was never just a wise old man. He was a strategist, a master of the long game. Every move, every word, every silence, carefully chosen, carefully timed. He knew where Harry lived, knew about the cupboard under the stairs, knew the Dursleys hated him. "You could not ask for a finer place," he had told McGonagall. And so he left Harry there, watched from a distance, and did nothing. Safety was more important than kindness.
He knew about the prophecy, knew Harry was at its center, knew he was marked for death, but he kept the truth from him. "I have not told you everything," he admitted. "I have been raising you like a pig for slaughter." Harry had the right to know, but knowledge meant choice, and Dumbledore needed him to walk the path laid out for him. Every year, every challenge, every battle, Dumbledore let it happen. The Sorcerer's Stone, the Basilisk, the Triwizard Tournament. He guided from the shadows, nudging Harry forward, never truly interfering. A test, a lesson, a necessary risk. Sirius Black could have taken Harry away, given him a home, but the moment he stepped outside Grimmauld Place, the Dementors were waiting. Dumbledore knew. "I am not proud," he confessed, but he had let it happen. Because if Harry had left, the plan would have unraveled. When the time came, Harry had to die. It was the only way. The snake must be killed at the proper moment, Dumbledore had told Snape. He had shaped Harry's life around sacrifice, molded him into a willing martyr, trusted that when the moment arrived, he would not hesitate. Number 12, souls doomed to eternal suffering. Dementors do not kill. What they do is worse. They do not take life. They take everything that makes life matter. In childhood, they are just monsters, dark figures that drain happiness, leaving only cold and despair. But as an adult, you see the truth. They do not steal joy. They steal identity. Azkaban is not a prison. It is a graveyard for the living. The inmates do not serve time. They decay. Slowly, silently. Year by year, their minds erode, their memories fade. They forget the sound of laughter, the warmth of love. They forget themselves. Sirius Black survived because he had something no one else had, knowledge. "I knew I was innocent," he said. That wasn't a happy thought. That was the truth. The others? They had no such shield. They crumbled under the weight of their own minds. But the worst fate was reserved for those who received the Dementor's kiss. The body remained. The person did not. "It's worse than dying," Lupin warned. "You can exist without your soul, you know, as long as your brain and heart are still working. But you'd have no sense of self anymore, no memory, no anything. There was no afterlife, no final rest, no second chance, just emptiness, a person erased from existence, yet forced to remain in their own husk. The wizarding world accepted this. They sent criminals to Azkaban knowing what awaited them. They called it justice. They let creatures of pure horror guard their prisoners, their own citizens, knowing that in time they would not be people anymore. Barty Crouch Jr. faced the Dementors in his own home. He was young, brilliant, powerful, and yet, by the time his father brought him back to prison, he was something else entirely. He no longer even knew his own name. The Dementors had done their work. Number 13. Cedric Diggory's death. Cedric Diggory was never supposed to die. He was young, strong, full of promise, a true Hufflepuff, loyal, fair, kind. He played by the rules. He believed in honor. And yet none of that mattered. He was just a boy. He fought no great battles. He led no rebellions. He simply reached for the Triwizard Cup, smiling, believing the contest was over. Then, in an instant, he was gone. Kill the spare. That was all it took. A casual order, a flick of a wand, a green flash. Cedric never even had time to scream. He collapsed onto the cold, damp ground of the graveyard, his eyes wide, lifeless. No final words, no struggle, just death. Voldemort could have left him alive, could have bound him, stunned him, cast him aside, but he didn't. He killed him simply because he could, because Cedric was there, because power meant taking life without reason. Harry stood frozen, staring at his fallen friend. Cedric had trusted him, had shared the victory with him. "Wand's out, do you reckon?" he had said just moments before. There was no time to draw, no time to fight, just a body hitting the ground. In the chaos that followed, no one thought of Cedric. Voldemort rose again. The Death Eaters gathered. The Dark Lord gloated, his voice echoing through the graveyard. And Cedric lay forgotten, a trophy of cruelty, a wasted life. Even when Harry escaped, even when he returned to Hogwarts, Cedric's death felt unreal. But then the cries began. Amos Diggory, a father seeing his son's body. "That's my son. That's my boy." His voice tore through the night, raw, broken, grief made real. The worst part, Cedric's death changed nothing. The Ministry denied it. They called it an accident, a mistake. The truth buried under lies. No statues were built. No war was won. He died not as a warrior, but as a message, a reminder of how cheap life was to Voldemort. And then, just like that, the world moved on. Hogwarts continued. Students laughed in the halls. The Daily Prophet printed its lies. But a father went home to an empty house. A house filled with trophies, with photos, with memories of a boy who should have lived. Cedric Diggory was never supposed to die, but he did, and it meant nothing. Number 14. Peter Pettigrew's betrayal. Peter Pettigrew was never meant to be a hero. He was small, weak, forgettable. In school, he clung to James, Sirius, and Remus like a shadow. The Marauders were legends. He was their tag-along, the one who laughed the loudest at their jokes, the one who followed, never led, but he was never truly one of them. Not in the way that mattered. He could have been loyal, could have been brave. But when the war came, he made his choice. Not because he was forced, not because he was tortured, but because it was easier. Voldemort was stronger, and Peter always followed strength. He was the secret keeper, the only one who knew where James and Lily were hiding. And he sold them.
It was over in seconds. A whispered betrayal, a knock at the door, a flash of green light. James never even had a chance to raise his wand. Lily died, screaming over her child. And Peter, he wasn't there to see it. He was already running.
Sirius found him first, in the middle of a crowded street, full of muggles who had no idea what was coming. Peter looked him in the eye and played his final trick. Lily and James, serious, how could you? Then he cut off his own finger, transformed, and disappeared into the sewers. 12 innocent people lay dead in the wreckage he left behind. For years he lived as a rat, scurrying in the dirt, hiding in the Weasleys' home, feeding off their kindness. No one suspected a thing. He watched Ron grow up, listened to stories about Harry, about Dumbledore, about the world he had abandoned. And when the time came, he crawled back to his master.
Number 15. Argus Filch's tragic existence.
Argus Filch was doomed from the start. Born to a wizarding family, yet without magic, he was neither here nor there. A squib, a failure. The wizarding world had no place for his kind. Muggles wouldn't understand him. Wizards didn't want him. He was trapped. Hogwarts should have been a dream. It was a nightmare. Magic was everywhere. Every flick of a wand, every glowing spell, every soaring broomstick, reminders of what he could never have. He walked the castle like a ghost. Invisible. Unwanted. Students laughed, they played, they grew stronger in magic. He grew bitter. Every day he watched them live the life he was denied. He had no power, no wand, no spells, only rules, and so he clung to them, his only weapon, his only way to matter. He patrolled the halls, hunting for troublemakers. "I'll see some punishment," he would snap, voice sharp, teeth clenched. He relished their fear. It made him feel less small, less weak, less forgotten. But they still mocked him. The Weasley twins tricked him with joke wands. Peeves tormented him, singing taunts down the corridors. Even Dumbledore, so wise, so kind, offered him nothing but a quiet tolerance. No solutions, no magic, just a place to stay. Mrs. Norris was the only one who understood. She saw what others missed, his pain, his rage, his loneliness. When the basilisk struck her down, something inside him shattered. "You'll be expelled for this!" he shrieked, but it wasn't anger. It was grief. He had tried to fix himself. Quickspell promised miracles. An all-new, fail-safe, quick result, easy learn course for beginners. He dared to hope, dared to dream. Then Harry found the letter. Filch saw the pity in his eyes. That was worse than any insult.
A squib. They whispered it behind his back. They knew he was nothing, less than nothing. Even the kind-hearted ones, like Harry, felt sorry for him. Pity was unbearable. He'd rather be feared.
But Hogwarts was his home and his prison. He loved it, hated it, needed it. He watched as students grew, learned, mastered magic. He cleaned up after them, unnoticed, forgotten. A servant in a world that should have been his. Number 16, Veritaserum, a tool of control. Truth seems so simple when we are young. The idea that a single potion can strip away all deception, laying bare every hidden secret, feels like justice in its purest form. But as we grow older, we begin to see the horror beneath that simplicity. Veritaserum is not just a tool for truth, it is a weapon that obliterates the boundaries between honesty and coercion, between justice and control. Imagine sitting in a chair, your heartbeat accelerating as you watch a tiny vial of colorless liquid being uncorked before you. Someone, perhaps a ministry official, perhaps a ruthless enforcer, holds it up to your lips. You resist, but your hands are tied, your wand is gone. The moment the potion touches your tongue, you feel it working. Your thoughts become slippery, your mind bends to an unseen force. You do not want to speak, but your mouth moves on its own. Your secrets are no longer yours. The Ministry of Magic claims it does not use Veritaserum on prisoners, stating that forced confessions are unreliable. But how many of its agents truly abide by that rule? We know for a fact that Dolores Umbridge had no qualms about using it at Hogwarts, a place where students were supposed to be safe. If the potion could be used so freely on mere schoolchildren, what then was happening in the dark corridors of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement? Consider the case of Barty Crouch Jr. in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Dumbledore administers Veritaserum to him in order to extract the truth about the Triwizard Tournament. His confession spills out in raw, horrifying detail how he had escaped from Azkaban, how he had stolen his father's identity, how he had served the Dark Lord in secret. It was an important moment, a revelation that changed everything, but something about it lingers, an unsettling reminder that without that potion he would never have spoken. He did not confess out of remorse, nor because he wanted to. He spoke because he had no choice, and that is the true terror of Veritaserum. When used in the hands of someone like Dumbledore, we might excuse it as a necessary evil, but imagine it in the hands of someone like Umbridge, who indeed used it against students as Harry himself suspected. "You're lying, Dolores," he said defiantly, in Order of the Phoenix, refusing to drink the tea she had so carefully laced with the potion. It was a moment of resistance, but what if he had taken even a sip? What if she had succeeded? What if the High Inquisitor of Hogwarts had been given the power to make every student spill their fears, their thoughts, their most personal truths? And what of the Ministry's unspeakables, those who work deep within the Department of Mysteries? Their work is shrouded in secrecy, and yet we are expected to believe that Veritaserum has never been weaponized against those deemed a threat. During the First Wizarding War, the Ministry was desperate, cracking down on any suspected Death Eater or sympathizer. Did they hesitate to use Veritaserum in their interrogations? Or did they pour it down the throats of every captured suspect, forcing them to reveal names, plans, locations, truths that may have been twisted under duress? Severus Snape himself spoke of Veritaserum with clear disdain. "3 drops of this and you would answer all my questions truthfully," he told Harry in Goblet of Fire, his voice a quiet warning. But Snape was no fool. He knew the dangers of such a potion. He, more than anyone, understood that truth under coercion is not truth at all. It is surrender. It is powerlessness. It is the stripping away of autonomy until nothing remains but a hollowed-out confession. And let us not forget the implications of such a potion outside the legal system. Imagine its use in the hands of private individuals, vengeful spouses, paranoid employers, or even obsessive lovers. How easy it would be to slip it into a drink, to demand answers, to uncover truths that were never meant to be shared. There would be no privacy, no sanctuary within one's own mind. The very essence of free will would be undone. The existence of Veritaserum forces us to ask a terrifying question. Is knowledge worth the cost of freedom? Some would argue that truth must always be revealed, that it is better to know than to remain in the dark. But at what cost? When does the pursuit of truth become a violation of the very soul? In a world where Veritaserum exists, no secret is safe. No lie can ever truly be kept. But neither can trust nor personal agency. Imagine the sheer horror of knowing that at any moment, someone with enough power and the right connections could force you to betray your own mind. Imagine living under a regime where Veritaserum is used freely, where trials no longer require defense attorneys, where justice is reduced to a vial of potion and the shaking voice of a helpless prisoner. The greatest irony is that Veritaserum does not even guarantee perfect truth. Human memory is flawed. Fear distorts perception. Under the influence of such a potion, could a person's mind begin to fabricate details they do not remember clearly? Could they confess to crimes they did not commit simply because their mind, under extreme duress, reshapes itself to fit the expectations of the interrogator. This is not speculation. This is history. In the Muggle world, similar tactics have been used throughout the centuries, from truth serums to coercive interrogations, from medieval torture devices to psychological conditioning. The pursuit of forced truth has always led to suffering. The wizarding world, with all its advancements, is no different. Veritaserum is merely a refined version of an ancient cruelty. The Ministry claims to have strict regulations on its use, but we must ask, who watches the Watchers? The same Ministry that sent innocent people to Azkaban during the height of the war, the same institution that turned a blind eye to the injustices committed under its own roof? And if they have ever used it once, what is to stop them from using it again? It is easy to think that only the guilty should fear Veritaserum, but power is rarely wielded justly. Innocence is fragile in the hands of those who thirst for control. And history has shown us, time and again, that what begins as a tool for justice often becomes a weapon of tyranny. One must also consider the nature of morality itself. Is it truly ethical to extract the truth against someone's will? The essence of confession is that it must be given freely. A truth that is torn from someone's lips is no better than a lie, for it has been taken by force. Dumbledore understood this well. That is why he rarely used Veritaserum, even when it would have been expedient. He believed in free will, in the power of choice. He believed that truth must be given, not stolen. He understood the horror of stripping a person of their autonomy, reducing them to nothing more than a puppet. And so we return to the core question, is Veritaserum a gift or is it a curse? In the hands of good people, perhaps it could be used responsibly. But power is fickle. Today's protector can become tomorrow's oppressor. And once a society normalizes the use of forced truth, it is only a matter of time before the potion is used not just against criminals, but against dissidents, against rivals, against anyone who dares to challenge the status quo. It is said that knowledge is power. But if knowledge is taken by force, then power belongs not to the just, but to the ruthless. And in a world where Veritaserum exists, we must ask ourselves, is truth worth the price of freedom? Number 17, Dumbledore's Secret Collection. Albus Dumbledore, a man of unparalleled wisdom and charm, was also a master of secrecy. It is easy to view him as the benevolent guide who led Harry Potter through the darkness of Voldemort's reign. But with time, a more unsettling thought begins to emerge. Dumbledore hoarded some of the most dangerous magical artifacts in existence, and he never truly explained why. He didn't destroy them. He didn't openly share their significance. He kept them as though he feared that one day he might need them again. Take, for example, the invisibility cloak. When Dumbledore left it with Harry, it seemed like a simple inheritance, a gift from father to son. But the truth was far more complex. This was no ordinary piece of enchanted fabric. It was a deathly hallow, one of the 3 legendary artifacts tied to the very essence of mortality itself. Did Dumbledore tell Harry this? No, he let the boy believe it was nothing more than a useful tool for sneaking around Hogwarts after curfew. And yet Dumbledore knew precisely what it was. He had been obsessed with the Hallows in his youth, alongside Gellert Grindelwald. He had dreamed of uniting them, of wielding the power of death itself. The cloak had come into his possession years before he gave it to Harry, but he had chosen to keep it rather than reveal its true nature. Why? Did he fear that Harry would seek the other Hallows? Did he worry that knowledge of the cloak's true origin would awaken something dangerous in the boy? Or was Dumbledore simply unwilling to let go of something so powerful, something he might have needed again? Then there was the Philosopher's Stone. Nicolas Flamel's great achievement, a source of eternal life, a miraculous object hidden within Hogwarts itself. But why was it there? Dumbledore claimed it was to keep it safe from Voldemort, but surely he knew that placing it in a castle full of children, protected by a series of puzzles that first-year students could navigate, was not the most secure plan. And then, when the stone was nearly stolen, he made another baffling decision. He and Flamel agreed to destroy it. After all, to the well-organized mind, death is but the next great adventure, he told Harry, as though that settled the matter. But what right did he have to make such a choice? The stone was a singular artifact, an object of legend. It had belonged to Flamel for centuries. Who was Dumbledore to decide that it should no longer exist? He claimed it was for the greater good, but that phrase had once been his justification for seeking the Hallows with Grindelwald. Was he truly destroying it for noble reasons? Or was he perhaps ensuring that no one else, no one less responsible than himself, could ever wield its power? And what of the Elder Wand, the most powerful wand in existence, a weapon forged for conquest and destruction, one of the most sought-after objects in magical history? Dumbledore possessed it for decades, used it in battle, and yet never spoke of it openly. He could have destroyed it. He could have snapped it in two and cast its fragments into the depths of the Black Lake. But he didn't. Instead, he took it to the grave with him, hoping, vainly foolishly, that by dying undefeated, its power would be broken. But Dumbledore should have known better. He had seen too much, studied too deeply, to believe that such a simple plan would work. The wand was bound to find a new master, and it did. Draco Malfoy and then Harry Potter, each taking possession of its legacy. If Dumbledore had truly wanted to end its cycle of destruction, he would have taken more drastic measures. But he didn't. He simply kept it, locked away in his office, a secret known only to himself. One might argue that he did all of this to protect the world from dark forces, but it is equally possible that he kept these artifacts close because he understood better than anyone how tempting they were. The boy who had once dreamed of absolute power had never truly let go of that dream. He had tamed it, controlled it, turned it toward nobler causes. But deep down he was still the same Dumbledore who had once imagined ruling the world alongside Grindelwald. His actions suggest a man who feared his own past desires. He did not trust himself to wield these objects without consequence, but he also did not trust anyone else to hold them, and so he hoarded them, watched over them like a dragon atop its treasure. Even when he passed them on, like the cloak to Harry, it was with deliberate secrecy, as though he could not bring himself to fully release them. There is a moment in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows when Harry confronts Dumbledore's past, realizing just how much the old man had hidden from him. He feels betrayed, deceived. "I trusted you," he says in the vision at King's Cross. And Dumbledore, with his ever-knowing, ever-sorrowful eyes, replies, "I was afraid, Harry. I was afraid that you would turn out like me." Perhaps that is the key to understanding why Dumbledore kept these objects so close. He had spent a lifetime walking the line between wisdom and power, between knowledge and temptation. He had seen what magic could do when wielded without restraint. And so rather than destroy the things that might corrupt others, he kept them for himself, always watching, always waiting. But power, even in the hands of the wise, is still power, and secrets, even when kept for the best reasons, are still secrets. Dumbledore's collection of magical artifacts was not merely a means of protection, it was a testament to his greatest flaw, his inability to truly let go. Number 18, House Elves and Slavery. House Elves have always been a peculiar part of the wizarding world, an element that, upon first encounter, seems charming, even endearing. We meet Dobby in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, a trembling, large-eyed creature with a quivering voice, ready to punish himself for the slightest disobedience. He adores Harry Potter and dreams of being free, and when Harry tricks Lucius Malfoy into giving Dobby a sock, it feels like a victory, a moment of pure justice. But as we grow older, we realize the underlying horror of this system. House elves are not mere magical helpers. They are bound servants with no agency of their own. They cannot simply choose to leave. Their entire existence is structured around servitude, passed down through generations like inherited property. They do not receive wages, they do not have days off, they do not even have the concept of personal freedom. The house elf system is, in essence, legalized slavery. There is no sugarcoating this. Wizards claim house elves are happy in their positions, but how can happiness exist without choice? The conditioning runs so deep that even the elves themselves do not see their servitude as a problem. When Hermione Granger, the only character in the series who actively tries to challenge this system, forms the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare, SPRW, she is met with ridicule. The other students laugh at her, and even Ron Weasley, who has spent his entire life in a poor but relatively kind household, dismisses her efforts as ridiculous. They like being enslaved, he argues. They're happy. This is the greatest tragedy of all. The house elves have been brainwashed to believe their oppression is normal. The wizards have ensured that even the thought of rebellion is seen as unnatural. Dobby is a rare exception, a miracle of self-awareness. But why is he alone in this? What happened to the others who may have dared to dream of freedom? We know that house elves are punished for disobedience, but we rarely see how deep that punishment can go. Kreacher, the embittered black family house elf, gives us a glimpse. He was not freed, but instead forced to live in self-hating misery, bound to serve a cruel, neglectful master. Sirius Black, despite his moral superiority over other pure-blood wizards, mistreated Kreacher. "Shut up, you filthy little vermin," he snapped at him. Kreacher's eventual loyalty to Harry and Hermione is not a sign of his liberation, but of his desperate need for any form of kindness, no matter how small. He was never free. He merely switched masters. What happens to house elves who refuse to obey? The books do not say, but the implications are dark. Wizards are not hesitant to use magic to control creatures they see as lesser beings. We see this in Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, where dangerous magical creatures are routinely controlled through enchantments. If a beast as powerful as a dragon can be subdued, then what stops a wizard from forcing a rebellious house elf into submission? The unforgivable curses exist. Wizards use Imperius to bend people's wills. Why would they hesitate to do the same to house elves? Even the Hogwarts house elves, who work tirelessly in the castle's kitchens, show no signs of discontent. They do not wish for freedom because they have never been allowed to imagine it. When Dobby is given a wage, a room, and a new life, he is considered strange. The other elves resent him for disrupting their system. Winky, a house elf dismissed by Barty Crouch Sr., does not celebrate her newfound freedom. She sinks into despair, drinking herself into a stupor because she no longer knows how to exist outside servitude. Wizards, for all their magical knowledge, lack the self-awareness to question their own cruelty. They see the goblins as schemers, the centaurs as savages, and the house elves as unquestioning labourers. The Ministry of Magic actively suppresses non-human rights. It is not just ignorance, it is deliberate. Even Albus Dumbledore, the most progressive wizard in the series, does nothing substantial to change the system. He treats the elves with kindness, yes, but he does not fight for their freedom. His legacy, for all its wisdom, is one of passive acceptance of this grim reality. The issue with house elf enslavement is not just that it exists, it is that it is normalized. We, as readers, are conditioned to accept it just as the wizards are. The books do not portray house elves as tragic figures in need of rescue, but rather as oddities. We sympathize with Dobby because he is different, but we do not stop to question why the others are not. When Voldemort rises to power, he does not seek to change the system of house elves, because why would he? The dark side of the wizarding world benefits from this slavery just as much as the so-called good side. House elves do not rebel because there is nowhere to run. Perhaps the most chilling part of this entire structure is that house elves are bound to their masters on a magical level. This is not simple servitude, it is an enforced contract written into their very existence. When Dobby disobeys the Malfoys, he is compelled to punish himself. Who created this system? How far back does it go? The books never answer, but the implications are horrific. At some point, wizards bound an entire species to be their eternal servants.
What if house elves once had their own civilization, their own culture, their own magic? If they could wield magic independently, what did the wizards do to strip them of their agency?
It is easy to imagine that there were once free elves who resisted, who fought, who dreamed of something better. But history is written by the victors, and in the wizarding world, the victors were those who held the wands. Dobby's death is perhaps the greatest tragedy of all. He dies free, but only after suffering years of servitude. He is killed not by a cruel master, but by a system that was never designed to let him survive. Here lies Dobby, a free elf, reads his tombstone, as if that one sentence undoes the centuries of oppression that came before. It does not. Hermione, in all her righteousness, tries to fight for them, but she fights alone. The house elves do not rise up. The wizards do not reconsider their stance. By the end of the series, the status quo remains largely unchanged. And that is the true horror of it all. A system built on oppression does not collapse overnight. Even when presented with kindness, house elves remain prisoners of their own conditioning. Wizards like to think of themselves as the dominant magical race, yet their greatest power is not magic. It is control. Control so complete that those under it do not even know they are shackled. House elves are not free. They never were. And as long as wizards hold power, they never will be. Number 19, Polyjuice Potion, the perfect crime. The Polyjuice Potion is one of the most fascinating magical concoctions in the wizarding world. Its effects are as remarkable as they are terrifying. A person who consumes it can take on the exact physical appearance of another, provided they have a piece of that person's body, usually hair. At first glance, this transformation might seem like an amusing party trick or a convenient way to sneak into restricted areas, but in reality, it is a weapon of deception, a tool for criminals that renders identity meaningless and makes justice almost impossible. This is not just a hypothetical concern. The books show us how dangerously effective the potion can be. One of the most chilling examples is Bartemius Crouch Jr., a devoted Death Eater who used the Polyjuice Potion to impersonate the formidable Auror Alastor Mad-Eye Moody for an entire school year. This was not a mere act of trickery, it was a masterclass in deception. Under the guise of Moody, Crouch gained access to Hogwarts, manipulated students, and guided Harry Potter toward the Triwizard Tournament's deadly finale. His disguise was so flawless that even Dumbledore, the most perceptive wizard of his time, was fooled. Now consider how easily this potion could be exploited in a world where trust is built on appearances. If a devoted follower of Voldemort could seamlessly assume the identity of a seasoned Auror, what is stopping an ambitious criminal from impersonating a high-ranking ministry official, a Gringotts banker, or even the Minister for Magic himself? The potential for infiltration, theft, and manipulation is limitless. In a society where magical detection and security measures are already questionable, Polyjuice Potion is a gaping vulnerability. The Ministry of Magic's security, despite its strict measures, has been breached multiple times using this potion. Hermione Granger, Ron Weasley and Harry Potter infiltrated the Ministry by transforming into employees with stolen hairs. Hermione's hair was still curling slightly, but the resemblance was astonishing, the book notes, emphasizing the near-perfect illusion. If 3 underage wizards with limited experience could penetrate the heart of magical governance, what could an organized criminal syndicate accomplish? Imagine a scenario in which a cunning wizard obtains a single hair from a high-profile official. A meeting is scheduled, documents are signed, laws are changed. No one suspects a thing until it is too late. Such a situation could rewrite the course of magical history. Indeed, it is chilling to think about how often similar schemes might have already occurred, hidden beneath the veil of assumed identities. The nature of justice becomes fragile when identity can be stolen. Crimes committed under another's face mean the true perpetrators walk free, leaving their unwitting victims to face the consequences. Consider a ruthless dark wizard who wishes to eliminate a rival. He does not duel or attack directly. Instead, he takes a hair, transforms into the rival's trusted friend, and executes the act. Who would be blamed? Witnesses would testify that they saw the friend commit the crime. Veritaserum could be unreliable. How could one prove that the accused had been impersonated? Take the case of Polyjuice Potion in its most sinister application, murder. A killer could transform into a trusted loved one, gain easy access to a victim, and leave behind damning evidence in the wrong hands. He looked exactly like him, but he wasn't. It wasn't Moody at all. Harry's horror upon realizing the truth about Crouch Jr. echoes the fundamental problem of the potion. It undermines perception itself. If the Death Eaters had exploited Polyjuice Potion more extensively, the Second Wizarding War might have played out even more disastrously. Voldemort's spies could have infiltrated the Order of the Phoenix. They could have taken the form of the Weasleys, of Lupin, even of Harry himself. The possibilities are endless. The war, chaotic as it was, could have descended into complete anarchy, with no one knowing whom to trust. The implications extend beyond war and politics. Financial crime in the wizarding world could be unstoppable. A skilled thief could impersonate a Gringotts goblin or a vault owner, emptying fortunes in broad daylight. Even the enchantments protecting vaults, such as recognizing the rightful owner, might be bypassed if Polyjuice Potion creates a perfect replication. A man could wake up one morning to find himself destitute, his vaults emptied by someone who wore his face. There is also the horrifying potential for identity theft on a deeply personal level. A husband could be replaced by an imposter, a teacher by an enemy. People could live with frauds for months, even years, and never suspect a thing. Love, trust, and intimacy could be exploited in the worst ways imaginable. And what about espionage? The wizarding world is filled with conflicts, factions, and hidden loyalties. Spies could walk undetected among their enemies, gathering intelligence without suspicion. It is shocking that such a scenario is not more widely acknowledged. Who is to say that history has not already been rewritten by such deceptions? Even outside the world of crime, the existence of Polyjuice Potion presents ethical dilemmas. Is a person still themselves if their appearance is stolen? What happens when the concept of personal identity can be so easily manipulated? The potion blurs the lines between self and other, truth and illusion. The potion's limitations, its foul taste, the difficulty in brewing it, the temporary effect, are poor safeguards against its potential misuse. Crouch Jr. maintained his disguise for a year, proving that with enough planning, one could maintain an assumed identity indefinitely. Who else might have done the same? One cannot help but wonder, why is such a dangerous potion still accessible? Should its use not be restricted, its ingredients controlled? The potential for disaster is too great to ignore.
Yet the magical community seems to overlook these dangers. Polyjuice Potion. We're not going to be drinking that again anytime soon, are we? Ron asks after their ordeal at the ministry. But the truth is, others will. Others already have. And others, in the shadows of the wizarding world, are surely using it for purposes far darker than a school adventure.
Polyjuice Potion is not just a trick or a tool, it is a loophole in reality itself. And as long as it exists, no one is truly safe from deception. Number 20, the taboo on Voldemort's name. Lord Voldemort's taboo on his own name was more than just a spell. It was a weapon, a calculated strategy of oppression. At first glance, it seemed like another sinister layer to his legend, reinforcing fear and superstition among wizards. After all, he had always been known as he who must not be named. But in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, this detail takes on an entirely new meaning. The name itself became a trap, an invisible net cast over Britain's magical society, catching and marking anyone who dared to defy the reign of terror. It was not merely magic, it was surveillance in its purest, most terrifying form. The power of this spell lay in its simplicity. Voldemort, knowing full well that only his most defiant enemies would be reckless enough to say his name, turned it into a trigger. Those who spoke it were instantly pinpointed, their location transmitted to Death Eaters in real time. It was an elegant, insidious system. Unlike other forms of magical tracking which required effort and magical skill, the taboo transformed mere words into weapons. The very act of speaking became a form of self-incrimination. Only brave men and fools dared to say it, Remus Lupin once said. But now bravery alone was enough to get someone killed. For years, Albus Dumbledore had been one of the few to refuse the culture of fear surrounding Voldemort's name. To him, refusing to say Voldemort was an act of submission, a symbolic surrender. Fear of a name increases fear of the thing itself, he had told Harry in The Sorcerer's Stone. But now, in the darkest days of the war, Dumbledore was gone, and that fear had become more than just a superstition. It had turned into a literal mark of death. To say the name was to be caught in an instant. The Resistance, the Order of the Phoenix, and all who fought against Voldemort found themselves forced into silence. The terrifying efficiency of the system revealed itself the night Harry, Hermione, and Ron made the fatal mistake of speaking the name. Hiding in a cramped room above a pub, they had been on the run for weeks, shifting locations, never staying anywhere too long. But the moment the word left Harry's lips, it was over. Voldemort, he had said, not realizing that this single word would break their fragile anonymity. There was no delay, no warning. Within minutes, snatchers, mercenary bounty hunters working under Voldemort, descended upon them. It was not magic as the world knew it. It was omniscience. It was absolute power. The leader of the snatchers that night was Scabier, a sneering, cruel man who relished the hunt. He had heard the taboo activate, had felt the strange pulse of magic that alerted them, and he knew exactly what it meant. Somewhere nearby, rebels had revealed themselves. His band wasted no time. Gotcha, Scabier had sneered when they captured Harry, his delight unmistakable. The taboo had done its work. It had stripped them of their hiding place, their secrecy, their power. But the system went beyond simply tracking words. It was psychological warfare. Even those who had never fought in the war, those who remained neutral or even fearful, were forced into silence. Wizards and witches who once resisted the fear of his name now found themselves swallowing their words. They had no choice. It was one thing to avoid saying Voldemort out of fear, but now silence was survival. The entire magical community was conditioned into obedience without ever needing to be physically threatened. Voldemort had engineered a reality where fear alone did the work of shackles and chains. In many ways, the taboo spell echoed real-world tactics of authoritarian regimes. Dictators throughout history have understood that the most powerful tool of control is not always violence, it is self-censorship. When people are forced to police their own words, to carefully choose what they say and to whom they say it, they become prisoners in their own minds. They carry their fear with them, nurturing it, allowing it to dictate their every interaction. Voldemort's name had become a test. Those who spoke it were rebels, and rebels were to be crushed without hesitation. It was not the first time Voldemort had used magic to enforce his rule through surveillance. The Muggle-born Registration Commission had operated under similar principles, hunting down those deemed unworthy with the help of bureaucratic control and informants. But the taboo was something different. It was efficient. It required no manpower, no paper trails, no messy interrogations. It was a net that only needed to be cast once, and those caught in it had nowhere to hide. The brilliance of the spell was in how effortlessly it reduced an entire nation into whispers. Even among Death Eaters, the fear of the name remained. Bellatrix Lestrange, Voldemort's most devoted follower, flinched when she heard it. Draco Malfoy, once a boy who had eagerly paraded his allegiance, refused to utter it even in the safety of Malfoy Manor. It was not just a name, it was Voldemort's shadow looming over them all. Even his own followers feared his wrath, feared what saying the name might bring upon them, feared what it meant to truly belong to the world he was building. The taboo also functioned as a method of separating enemies from allies. Those who did not fear the name were the greatest threat to Voldemort's rule. The Order of the Phoenix, Dumbledore's army, and anyone who had fought against him in the First Wizarding War had been conditioned to reject the superstition. They were the first to be caught, the first to be hunted down. It was no coincidence that the most powerful wizards, the bravest fighters, the most dangerous rebels, were the first to be captured. By targeting those who dared to speak his name, Voldemort was eliminating resistance before it could truly begin. It was Hermione who had realized what was happening. As soon as the Snatchers found them, she knew. "It's the name," she had whispered, her voice tinged with the kind of fear she rarely allowed herself to show. It was always Hermione, logical, analytical, brilliant, who pieced together the puzzle first. The name had not just been a myth, it was a spell, a strategy, a leash wrapped tightly around the throat of every wizard in Britain. Harry himself had long refused to accept the fear surrounding the name. Since childhood, he had rejected the idea that Voldemort was someone to be feared into silence. But now, for the first time, he understood. This was not just about fear, it was about control. This was about the systematic destruction of free speech. The ability to name an enemy is the first step in fighting them, and Voldemort had taken even that away. In a world where even a single word could betray you, the battle was already half lost. After their capture, Harry, Hermione, and Ron were dragged to Malfoy Manor. Their fight had been over before it had even begun. The taboo had handed them directly to Voldemort's most dangerous supporters, and there had been nothing they could do to stop it. They had been tracked like animals, their resistance crushed with a whisper. This spell, this single piece of magic, was not just a tool of war. It was the foundation of Voldemort's reign. It was how he controlled Britain without needing armies patrolling every street. It was how he ensured obedience without needing to enforce laws. He had created a world where wizards enslaved themselves, where silence was the only defense against his power. And in doing so, he had transformed the simple act of speaking into an act of rebellion. But, in the end, the resistance could not be silenced forever. The fall of Voldemort was not just about defeating him in battle, It was about reclaiming words, reclaiming power. When Harry faced him in the Great Hall, surrounded by survivors and fighters, he spoke the name without fear. "Voldemort," he said, his voice steady, his eyes unwavering. And in that moment the spell was broken. The taboo had lost its power, not because it had been lifted, but because the fear had been shattered. The name had been spoken, and Voldemort was no longer a god. He was just a man, and his reign of silence was over. Number 21. Armando Dippet's fatal mistake. Armando Dippet was never meant to be a villain. In fact, those who knew him described him as benevolent, kind-hearted, and perhaps overly trusting. But it is precisely such men who, blinded by kindness or simple naivety, inadvertently open the doors for darkness to walk freely. Hogwarts had seen great and wise headmasters, yet history now quietly sidesteps Dippet's name as though trying to forget the gentle but deadly mistake he made, a mistake that would change the wizarding world forever. When Tom Riddle first arrived at Hogwarts, few could have predicted his dark destiny. To Dippet, he was merely a quiet, exceptionally talented orphan, eager to learn and desperate to prove himself. Tom was a polite, quiet boy, Dippet once noted in his personal journal, discovered decades later in the archives of the school's library. A brilliant student, yes, perhaps overly ambitious, but ambitious boys often become great men. This blind optimism was exactly what made Dippet the perfect pawn in Tom Riddle's subtle manipulation. The critical turning point arrived during Tom Riddle's 5th year, when the mysterious opening of the Chamber of Secrets plunged Hogwarts into panic. Students were petrified, whispers filled the halls, and suspicion spread like wildfire. Yet when the school desperately needed decisive leadership, Dippet faltered. In a moment of confusion and fear, the headmaster grasped at the simplest solution, believing the accusations made by the charismatic and persuasive Riddle, who presented the enormous spider, Aragog, as evidence against young Rubeus Hagrid. Hagrid was swiftly expelled, his wand snapped in two, and he was banned from practicing magic, his life irreversibly damaged. The innocent half-giant tearfully protested, declaring it wasn't him, Aragog never killed no one, but Dippet, overwhelmed and desperate to calm the fearful parents demanding action, chose the easiest route rather than the truthful one. In doing so, he unknowingly protected the real culprit, allowing Riddle to roam freely and continue down his dark path. Albus Dumbledore, then only a professor, voiced his concerns, softly warning Dippet, "I am not entirely convinced that Hagrid was behind this tragedy, Armando. It seems we might have acted too hastily." But by then, the headmaster had already made his decision. In his desire to restore peace, Dippet never seriously reconsidered Hagrid's innocence. It was easier to dismiss lingering doubts than to accept the terrifying truth that a promising student was the real monster within their walls. Time passed, and Tom Riddle's darkness grew unchecked. Dippet, oblivious to the storm brewing within the talented young wizard, continued to see only a gifted boy facing difficult circumstances. He encouraged Tom, entrusted him with responsibilities, even appointed him head boy. Such privileges meant unrestricted access to Hogwarts' darkest corners, deepest secrets, and most powerful magical knowledge. Dippet effectively provided Riddle all he needed, underestimating what lay beneath his perfect facade. One evening, as the sun set over the Great Lake, Dippet himself praised Tom before the entire school, remarking warmly, "Tom Riddle exemplifies what Hogwarts strives to cultivate: intelligence, dignity, and remarkable magical ability." The headmaster could not have known that his praise fed Tom's growing arrogance, inflating his dangerous ambition. Dippet was shaping him into something terrifying, reinforcing Tom's belief that he was exceptional, untouchable, even destined for greatness at any cost. Dippet's tragic blindness reached its apex when Tom Riddle approached him with a disturbing request to remain at Hogwarts after his graduation. Tom argued passionately, declaring his undying loyalty to the school, stating he had nowhere else to turn. Dippet, moved by the plea of an orphaned boy seemingly desperate for home, believed him. "I see no reason why a student of your remarkable talent and obvious devotion should not remain," Dippet wrote afterward, justifying his decision. "He may yet become one of Hogwarts' greatest treasures." It was this decision that granted Tom unprecedented freedom to delve deeper into forbidden magics. With continued access to Hogwarts, Riddle studied the castle's secrets methodically, slipping quietly into the restricted sections of the library, exploring hidden passageways, learning ancient and forbidden spells. He became more than a student. He became a predator within the school's stone walls, concealed in plain sight. Yet Dippet remained blissfully ignorant, comfortable in his illusion that he had saved a bright young wizard from hardship rather than sealing the fate of countless lives. Years after Tom Riddle vanished from Hogwarts, whispers of a dark wizard known as Voldemort began surfacing throughout the wizarding community. But even then, Dippet refused to see the connection, dismissing rumors and suspicions. Tom was ambitious, he admitted privately, perhaps overly so, but evil, impossible. Not the Tom I knew. Such stubbornness was Dippet's tragic flaw. Even when reality became undeniable, he clung desperately to his idealized memories. Dippet retired quietly, stepping down to make way for Albus Dumbledore, now a man profoundly aware of the mistakes his predecessor had made. Dumbledore, burdened by knowledge and regret, confided to Professor McGonagall, "Armando trusted too deeply, saw only what he wished to see. I fear we will all soon pay the price for that innocence." His words were prophetic. Voldemort rose to terrifying power, initiating a reign of fear that would stain the wizarding world for generations. Dippet lived to see Voldemort's terror grow, though he refused ever to publicly acknowledge his role in enabling it. Behind closed doors, however, old students whispered stories of their former headmaster's troubled nights. Professor Slughorn remembered visiting him in retirement, finding Dippet staring blankly out a window, muttering softly, "Could I have done more? Should I have known?" The weight of those unanswered questions haunted him deeply, tarnishing what should have been a peaceful twilight. By the time Dippet passed away, his name had already begun fading from memory. Hogwarts remembered him only vaguely, overshadowed completely by the legend and wisdom of Albus Dumbledore. No portraits of Dippet were prominently displayed, no statues celebrated his tenure. He had become merely a footnote, a ghostly figure whose greatest legacy was one of tragic error rather than triumph. Yet history occasionally casts judgment quietly, in subtle whispers. Harry Potter himself discovered the bitter irony firsthand during his second year, uncovering the truth about the Chamber of Secrets. In Tom Riddle's preserved memory, the younger Voldemort coldly informed Harry, "Poor old Dippet had no idea what I was truly capable of. He believed everything I told him, desperate to solve the puzzle quickly." It was a chilling confession, one that finally revealed to the boy who lived exactly how deeply Dippet's choices had shaped Voldemort's rise. In that single confession lay the heart of Dippet's tragic fate, a man who desperately wished only to nurture, protect, and guide, yet whose inability to recognize darkness indirectly unleashed horrors upon the world. Hogwarts learned bitterly from his mistakes, instilling caution into those who succeeded him. Future generations were taught never again to underestimate the quiet potential of evil hidden beneath masks of ambition or innocence. Though forgotten by many, Armando Dippet's story remains profoundly significant, a haunting reminder to all who hear it. His well-intentioned errors warn that kindness without vigilance or wisdom can be as dangerous as cruelty itself. It is a story of good intentions twisted by naivete, hope exploited by darkness, and innocence corrupted by deception. The forgotten headmaster who once warmly praised Tom Riddle became a symbol of the terrible consequences one man's trust can have for the entire wizarding world. In the end, Dippet's greatest tragedy was that he believed in the potential of the wrong boy. His decision forever bound him to the legacy of Lord Voldemort, an unintentional accomplice whose gentle nature unknowingly laid the foundation for the greatest evil the wizarding world had ever known. For Armando Dippet, history did not grant absolution, only oblivion, an oblivion as quiet, gentle, and tragically blind as the man himself. Number 22. Blood purity ideology. At first glance, the concept of blood purity in the wizarding world of Harry Potter seems to be a fictional conflict created solely for drama. However, as readers mature and delve deeper into history, alarming parallels become increasingly evident. The twisted ideology of pure blood superiority echoes disturbingly familiar real-world ideologies rooted in prejudice, discrimination, and ultimately, hatred. The magical society Rowling created reveals unsettling truths about how deeply prejudice can embed itself into societal structures, mirroring troubling historical events and mindsets from our own world. The ideology behind pure blood supremacy is starkly embodied by certain prominent families within the wizarding community. Take the Malfoys, for instance, Lucius, Narcissa, and their son Draco. They represent a typical example of old, wealthy wizarding nobility, deeply convinced that their pure blood status inherently places them above witches and wizards born to non-magical parents. The Malfoys' disdain is frequently voiced throughout the series, particularly in the early encounters between Draco and Hermione Granger, whom he labels filthy little mudblood, a term steeped in venomous contempt. J.K. Rowling specifically highlights this sinister ideology through Draco Malfoy's arrogance. His sneer at Hermione in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets underscores the prejudiced mentality ingrained in him from childhood. No one asked your opinion, you filthy little mudblood. The casual cruelty in his words showcases how normalized such prejudice had become in pure blood households, clearly indicating the destructive power of generational indoctrination. Yet the Malfoys were not unique in their hateful ideology. Families such as the Lestranges proudly stood alongside Lord Voldemort, not merely out of fear or personal gain, but out of genuine ideological alignment. Bellatrix Lestrange herself represents fanatic devotion to pure blood supremacy, embodying a terrifying zeal that transcends mere loyalty. Her violent persecution of Muggleborns and half-bloods isn't motivated by mere dislike, but rather a deeply rooted belief in racial purity that parallels the darkest chapters of human history, such as Nazi Germany's Aryan supremacy ideology. Consider the Black family depicted vividly through the family tapestry at Grimmauld Place. Sirius Black, who opposed these racist views, explicitly describes his family's extreme prejudice. My parents, with their pure blood mania, convinced that to be a Black made you practically royal. The Blacks obsessed with lineage purity ostracized family members who defied their strict ideology, burning off names from their tapestry. This fanatic obsession with blood purity mirrors historical instances where families would disown members who opposed their deeply held racist or nationalist beliefs, emphasizing how such toxic ideologies fracture even the most intimate relationships. The consequences of blood prejudice are chillingly illustrated by Dolores Umbridge, whose sugary exterior masked a vicious bigotry towards non-purebloods. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Umbridge coldly interrogates Mary Cattermole, accusing her of stealing magic. A wand only chooses witches or wizards. You are not a witch. Umbridge's conviction that magical ability could be linked solely to blood purity directly mirrors dangerous ideologies throughout human history, where pseudo-scientific beliefs were weaponized to justify discrimination, persecution, and even genocide. Rowling illustrates how pure blood ideology infects societal institutions through Hogwarts itself. The school's founder, Salazar Slytherin, notoriously believed that only students of pure blood lineage deserved education, thus embedding prejudice into the very fabric of Hogwarts' foundation. The Chamber of Secrets, Slytherin's hidden lair, symbolizes how deeply rooted prejudice remains concealed within societies, waiting silently beneath the surface to emerge violently. Tom Riddle, who would become Lord Voldemort, fully embraced Slytherin's twisted ideology, turning Hogwarts into a battleground over blood purity. Lord Voldemort's own obsession with blood purity is paradoxical and haunting. Though himself a half-blood, Voldemort fervently pursued pure blood supremacy as a means of acquiring power. His ideology wasn't merely personal prejudice, it became a rallying cry for those seeking to restore pure blood dominance. Voldemort manipulated these beliefs, strategically exploiting fears and hatred to unite pure blood supremacists under his banner. His chilling declaration in Goblet of Fire, where he derides his father for being a muggle, encapsulates his twisted vision. My father's blood was tainted, you see. I vowed that I would rise above him. After Voldemort's downfall, readers might assume that Wizarding Society would abandon its discriminatory ways, yet Rowling deftly shows that prejudice never truly disappeared. Lucius Malfoy's brief imprisonment after the Second War did not erase generations of prejudice ingrained in the magical community. Instead, the pure-blood elite quietly reclaimed their social standing, preserving influence and privilege. Draco, though somewhat repentant, never fully sheds the trappings of his inherited superiority, implying that the roots of prejudice are too deeply embedded to vanish with one defeat. This continuation of prejudice highlights a crucial lesson Rowling imparts, that the defeat of a single villain does not eradicate deeply entrenched systemic discrimination. Characters like Dolores Umbridge and Draco Malfoy demonstrate how racism endures in subtler, institutionalized forms even after the visible threat of Voldemort has passed. Rowling invites readers to question the extent to which society can truly progress if it refuses to confront and dismantle the foundations of its prejudices. Furthermore, pure blood ideology mirrors disturbing historical events outside the fictional universe. Rowling herself acknowledges parallels to Nazi Germany's racial purity laws. Voldemort's regime draws unmistakable comparisons to Hitler's Third Reich, where so-called Aryan purity justified unimaginable atrocities. The Ministry of Magic under Voldemort implemented horrifying laws resembling the Nuremberg laws, classifying wizards and witches by their blood status and systematically discriminating against Muggle-borns. This chilling parallel underscores Rowling's central theme: the dangers of allowing prejudice to infiltrate positions of power. Specific events like the Muggle-born Registration Commission established by Voldemort's puppet ministry eerily resemble historical instances of systematic persecution. This commission persecuted witches and wizards based solely on their birth, forcing them into hiding or imprisonment, clearly reminiscent of historical pogroms and genocidal practices. Rowling's choice to include such explicitly oppressive structures serves as a haunting reminder that prejudice, when institutionalized, leads inexorably towards violence and injustice. The Weasley family, juxtaposed against pure-blood supremacists, represents a powerful counter-narrative. Despite their pure-blood status, the Weasleys are mocked and despised by other pure-blood families, like the Malfoys, for their acceptance of Muggle-borns. Arthur Weasley, particularly, embodies progressive ideals, tirelessly combating pure-blood prejudice. The mockery Arthur endures, such as Lucius Malfoy's scornful remark in Chamber of Secrets, associating with Muggles. I thought your family could sink no lower, further emphasizes how deeply prejudice isolates and vilifies even those who stand against it from within. Harry Potter's friendship with Hermione Granger and Ron Weasley symbolizes defiance against blood prejudice. Hermione, an exceptionally talented witch of Muggle heritage, frequently proves blood status has no bearing on magical talent or worth. Her brilliance, kindness, and unwavering courage contrast sharply with the cowardice and cruelty of pure-blood supremacists. Through Hermione, Rowling dismantles the false correlation between lineage and ability, emphasizing merit and character over inherited status, echoing movements for equality in real-world history. Yet despite these examples, the persistent grip of pure blood ideology on wizarding society shows how deeply prejudice can corrupt, linger, and resurface. The subtle yet persistent discrimination faced by characters like Hermione after Voldemort's defeat highlights that prejudice doesn't vanish overnight. Rowling, through nuanced storytelling, argues that society must remain vigilant against prejudice in all forms, recognizing that complacency can allow hateful ideologies to resurface and thrive. In real life, societies continue grappling with the legacy of racial, ethnic, and ideological supremacism. Rowling's allegory warns readers against forgetting history or assuming prejudice is merely fictional. By carefully weaving parallels with real-world discrimination, she challenges readers to recognize and confront the troubling ideologies that still persist today. The lesson is clear. Overcoming prejudice requires ongoing, active resistance rather than passive tolerance or denial. Ultimately, Rowling's depiction of blood purity in the wizarding world is neither simplistic nor merely allegorical. It serves as a powerful commentary on the dangers of allowing hateful ideologies to become normalized. By vividly illustrating the disastrous consequences of blood prejudice, Rowling compels readers to critically examine similar ideologies in our world. The fictional struggles of witches and wizards remind us vividly that combating prejudice is a perpetual, essential fight, one that requires courage, compassion, and constant vigilance, lest history tragically repeat itself. Number 23. Total control of the wizarding government. From the very first pages of the Harry Potter series, the Ministry of Magic seems merely bureaucratic, a standard governmental entity focused on mundane administration. Yet, as readers grow older and reread the series with mature eyes, the sinister depth of the Ministry's control over wizarding society becomes increasingly apparent. It isn't simply a bureaucratic machine, it is a formidable apparatus that exerts near totalitarian influence on every aspect of a witch or wizard's existence. The facade of orderliness and benevolence quickly fades, revealing an institution capable of terrifying abuses of power with chilling methods of enforcement, propaganda, and punishment at its disposal. One of the most unsettling examples of the Ministry's invasive control manifests vividly in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. Dolores Umbridge, appointed as Hogwarts' defense against the dark arts professor, swiftly begins to demonstrate just how far-reaching the Ministry's power can be. Under Minister Cornelius Fudge's direct instructions, Umbridge systematically enacts a series of draconian educational decrees, each explicitly designed to suppress dissent and silence truth. For instance, Educational Decree number 24 explicitly states, "No student organizations, societies, teams, groups, and clubs may exist without the knowledge and approval of the High Inquisitor." With one simple edict, the Ministry, through Umbridge, gains direct control over social interactions and activities, severely limiting students' freedom of expression and assembly. The suppression doesn't end there. The Ministry is not content to control only actions. It aggressively targets the thoughts and speech of individuals. When Harry Potter speaks the truth about Voldemort's return, the Ministry doesn't simply deny his words, it orchestrates a full-scale smear campaign against him, Overnight, the Daily Prophet, once considered a reputable news source, transforms into an outright propaganda tool, demonizing Harry as a delusional liar desperate for attention. Quotes from the paper illustrate this vividly, such as calling him an attention-seeking show-off and dismissing Dumbledore as a dangerously eccentric old fool. The Ministry's power is frighteningly evident in how swiftly the media aligns itself with official rhetoric, obliterating independent journalism and destroying Harry's credibility among the wizarding public. This control of the press is not subtle. It demonstrates the Ministry's power to eliminate uncomfortable truths from public discourse. When the wizarding world most needed accurate information, the Ministry ensured the Prophet was silent, ridiculing those who spoke against the government's narrative. This manipulation directly contributed to Voldemort's rise, allowing darkness to fester in secrecy. It is a haunting reflection of real-world totalitarian practices, silencing critics, controlling the narrative, and steering public opinion by controlling information. Yet perhaps even more frightening is the Ministry's ruthless approach to education. Hogwarts, traditionally an autonomous institution under Albus Dumbledore's wise and compassionate leadership, becomes a battleground for the Ministry's power struggle. Umbridge is promoted to Hogwarts High Inquisitor, empowered to inspect, evaluate, and remove teachers at will. Her inspections are a thinly veiled attempt to enforce Ministry-approved doctrine, stifling true education and critical thought. Teachers who dare resist or challenge her authority are publicly humiliated, threatened, or outright dismissed. A notable example is Professor Trelawney's cruel firing, witnessed by the entire student body in the courtyard of Hogwarts, which clearly illustrates the Ministry's merciless intent to stamp out any opposition. Moreover, Umbridge herself openly declares her intent to reform Hogwarts according to the Ministry's will, coldly stating, "Things at Hogwarts are far worse than I feared. Cornelius will want to take immediate action." This chilling assertion explicitly reveals how the Ministry perceives education, as merely another instrument of political control, a tool to mold future generations into obedient followers, stripped of independent thinking and critical questioning. In Umbridge's classroom, practical defense against the dark arts is forbidden, replaced with meaningless theoretical lessons. Students are trained to become passive consumers of state-approved knowledge, discouraged from thinking independently, much less challenging authority. Yet, even these harsh measures pale compared to the Ministry's darkest weapon of coercion. The Dementors. Azkaban, the Ministry's notorious prison, is not merely a facility for incarceration. It is a horrifying instrument of psychological torture. Dementors, dark creatures that feed on despair and happiness alike, are employed by the Ministry to guard prisoners, relentlessly draining them of hope and sanity. Sirius Black's 12-year imprisonment in Azkaban provides a devastating portrayal of its cruelty. Black, wrongly accused and imprisoned without trial, describes Azkaban's horrors, recounting, "Most prisoners go mad in there, and a lot of them stop eating in the end. They lose the will to live." The Ministry knowingly inflicts this brutal punishment, using Dementors as ruthless agents who systematically annihilate human dignity and willpower. Azkaban's existence alone is proof of the Ministry's frightening disregard for human rights. It functions as both deterrent and threat, a constant reminder of the consequences awaiting anyone who defies Ministry rule. Moreover, during Harry's 5th year, the Ministry actively deploys Dementors against innocent individuals. Harry himself is targeted in Little Whinging, illustrating that the Ministry is willing to use Dementors beyond prison walls, even against children, to enforce obedience through fear. Perhaps the most terrifying realization, though, is that the Ministry's extreme power predates Voldemort's infiltration. Even before the Dark Lord seized control, the Ministry possessed these tools of oppression, controlling media, education, thought, and punishment. Voldemort merely exploited and perfected an already oppressive system. The Ministry had long been capable of atrocity, quietly building its power structures and methods of control under the guise of protecting society. Voldemort's takeover, therefore, was not an aberration. It was the logical extension of unchecked power that the Ministry itself created. Cornelius Fudge's tenure clearly illustrates the Ministry's capacity for denial and abuse, even without direct influence from Voldemort. Fudge's paranoia and desperate attempts to cling to power reveal the innate authoritarian tendencies within the institution. His furious refusal to acknowledge Voldemort's return reflects a deeply ingrained belief that the Ministry's authority must never be challenged. Rather than protecting the public, the Ministry under Fudge actively endangered it, putting political stability above truth and public safety. Rufus Scrimgeour's tenure, though seemingly more competent, similarly emphasizes authoritarian measures. His attempts to recruit Harry as a symbolic figurehead demonstrate a cynical approach to public manipulation. Scrimgeour's ministry cares less about actual security and more about perception, controlling public sentiment rather than addressing the real threat. Harry rightly criticizes Scrimgeour, exposing the ministry's true priorities, maintaining the illusion of control rather than genuinely protecting people. When Voldemort finally infiltrates the ministry, the institution's authoritarian apparatus is already perfectly suited to his purposes. The rapid implementation of anti-Muggle-born legislation under the puppet minister Pius Thickness vividly demonstrates how effortlessly Voldemort manipulates existing ministry structures. Umbridge's revival and enthusiastic implementation of oppressive policies against Muggle-born wizards underscore that the ministry's authoritarian potential always existed. Her sham trials sentencing innocents to Azkaban based on fraudulent blood status claims chillingly echo totalitarian regimes' historical abuses. The oppressive apparatus wasn't Voldemort's creation. He merely activated what already existed. The Ministry's ability to shape the wizarding world's collective beliefs is perhaps best exemplified by its swift response to public opinion. After Voldemort's fall, Kingsley Shacklebolt assumes leadership, and the Ministry quickly reverses its stance again, embracing truth and transparency, but the fundamental structures of power remain largely unchanged. Even in peace, the institution retains immense potential for authoritarian control, depending solely on leadership intentions. Without fundamental reform, the threat of tyranny remains lurking beneath the surface, always ready to rise again should the Ministry choose authoritarianism over democracy. In examining these specific cases, from Umbridge's educational decrees to the Dementors' use in Azkaban, one truth becomes clear. The Ministry of Magic's dominance over wizarding society was never simply bureaucratic, it was authoritarian at its core. The Ministry didn't merely govern, it controlled, manipulated, and intimidated. And as Harry Potter himself learned through painful personal experience, that kind of unchecked authority is dangerously vulnerable to exploitation by those hungry for absolute power. Such power isn't fictional, it's an ever-present warning about how easily authority can become tyranny if left unchecked by courage and truth. Number 24. The economy of the wizarding world is heartless. In the enchanting and seemingly idyllic wizarding world, an invisible yet deeply entrenched divide silently separates the privileged from those in desperate need. Despite magic's seemingly limitless power, poverty persists as stubbornly here as it does in the ordinary world. Take, for instance, the Weasley family, warm-hearted, fiercely loyal, and undeniably brave, yet perpetually struggling. Arthur Weasley dedicates his life to the Ministry of Magic, tirelessly working long hours as the head of the misuse of Muggle artifacts office, yet his family lives on the brink of poverty. His salary is barely enough to support 7 children, forcing Molly Weasley to make do with homemade clothes and second-hand books. It's impossible not to feel a pang of sadness at Ron's embarrassment when Harry Potter first visits the Burrow and sees their ramshackle home. Despite their goodness, the Weasleys are mocked and sneered at for their shabby robes. As Draco Malfoy cruelly points out, "Think my name's funny, do you? No need to ask who you are. Red hair and a hand-me-down robe. You must be a Weasley, Philosopher's Stone." This stark reality contrasts sharply with the glittering wealth of wizarding families like the Malfoys. Lucius Malfoy strides confidently through the polished marble halls of Gringotts, his vault filled with golden galleons, guarded jealously by goblins whose sole loyalty is to money. Yet just a short distance away, the Weasley vault lies bare, echoing hollowly with emptiness, revealing how starkly indifferent the wizarding world is towards those who struggle. Indeed, Gringotts itself, the premier magical financial institution governed exclusively by goblins, exists purely to accumulate wealth rather than serve any altruistic or communal function. Harry himself recognizes the disparity when he sees the Weasleys anxiously counting their sickles and nuts for basic school supplies, while his own inherited vault overflows with gold he barely understands or values. And then there's Remus Lupin, a wizard deeply gifted in defense against the dark arts, intelligent, compassionate, and gentle, yet cast aside by wizarding society merely because of the lycanthropy forced upon him as a child. Lupin spends most of his life isolated, shunned, moving from job to job, barely surviving from month to month. Despite his extraordinary talents, no one willingly employs him due to an uncontrollable condition he cannot change. In a world where potions can regrow bones overnight, no magic exists, or perhaps no one truly cares enough to find a cure or even manage his illness humanely. Lupin himself bitterly acknowledges this when speaking with Harry, quietly confessing, "I've been shunned all my adult life, unable to find paid work because of what I am." Prisoner of Azkaban. The wizarding community's apathy is not limited only to wizards. House elves, small magical creatures gifted with extraordinary power, live tragically enslaved existences. These creatures, such as Dobby and Winky, work tirelessly under harsh conditions, suffering endless abuse and humiliation at the hands of their masters. Hermione Granger's outraged reaction to this injustice is one of the few voices crying out against the normalized cruelty. "It's slavery, that's what it is. That Mr. Crouch made her go up to the top of the stadium, and she was terrified, and he's got her enchanted so she can't even run when they start trampling tents. Why doesn't anyone do something?" Goblet of Fire. Hermione's passionate outcry highlights a crucial and deeply uncomfortable truth. No one intervenes because society prefers convenience over compassion. Indeed, magic could end such inequity overnight. Spells to repair broken bones or regrow limbs are commonplace, potions to heal grievous injuries are readily available, yet the poor remain poor. The Weasleys, though respected by decent wizards and witches, receive no systemic support, no magical assistance to alleviate their poverty. Remus Lupin must endure poverty and stigma without institutional aid, even though a wizarding government capable of arresting and detaining criminals with a flick of a wand clearly has sufficient resources to help him. The magical society simply chooses not to act. Rather, it sustains a status quo where privilege and wealth define worth and opportunity. In this way, wizard society reflects Muggle society's darkest failings: selfishness, prejudice, and neglect of those in need. Consider Severus Snape, whose harsh personality is at least partly shaped by his upbringing in extreme poverty and neglect. Living in Spinner's End, a dilapidated Muggle neighborhood, Snape grew up isolated and impoverished, fueling resentment and bitterness that colored his entire life. It is no coincidence that his family's lack of wealth contributed to Snape's initial rejection and bullying at Hogwarts, further illustrating how poverty fuels marginalization, even in a world of supposed wonder and magic. Yet wizard society does nothing to address these underlying inequalities, choosing instead to judge and dismiss those less fortunate rather than empower or assist them. Even the Ministry of Magic, the supposed protector and overseer of magical society, remains astonishingly indifferent to systemic poverty and discrimination. Instead of addressing the root causes of inequality, the ministry invests in superficial appearances of strength, status, and wealth. Cornelius Fudge's obsession with appearances rather than substance means the ministry spends vast resources on self-aggrandizing ceremonies and propaganda, ignoring struggling citizens like the Weasleys or discriminated individuals like Lupin. The injustice is palpable, yet unspoken, swept under elegant rugs and hidden behind magical illusions. This systemic disregard is illustrated when Dolores Umbridge, as the High Inquisitor at Hogwarts, makes policies that directly discriminate against non-human beings. Her deep-seated prejudice manifests in regulations explicitly designed to oppress and marginalize, yet nobody within the wizarding world stands up to defend the rights of house elves, centaurs, or werewolves. Instead, this oppression goes largely unchallenged, demonstrating that the wizarding world's compassion only extends as far as convenience allows. Moreover, the daily lives of many magical beings are marred by hardships entirely preventable with even minimal empathy. Take, for example, Argus Filch, Hogwarts caretaker, who suffers endlessly from his inability to perform magic. Born a squib, Filch is constantly surrounded by young witches and wizards mastering spells effortlessly, yet his own limitations are mocked or ignored. Magic could have provided him a meaningful role or integrated him respectfully into society, yet Filch is perpetually reduced to bitterness and resentment, trapped by social exclusion rather than physical inability. In the luxurious Malfoy manor, house elves work tirelessly to uphold lavish lifestyles, while Draco, Narcissa, and Lucius live in careless opulence. These creatures endure daily torment, overlooked entirely by wealthy wizards who consider them mere possessions. Magic could free them instantly, yet society actively reinforces their slavery because challenging such a system would threaten the comforts enjoyed by those at the top. Thus, compassion loses out repeatedly to convenience, empathy to selfishness, illustrating clearly that magic alone cannot overcome human moral failures. Even Hogwarts, a supposedly egalitarian educational institution, subtly reinforces class distinctions through expensive textbooks and equipment, effectively excluding poorer students from truly equal participation. Harry himself notices the strain on the Weasleys each new school year as they struggle to afford necessities, yet no official financial aid exists for students in need. This systemic neglect is encapsulated in Ron's embarrassed admission to Harry. "You never get anything new either, with 5 brothers. I've got Bill's old robes, Charlie's old wand, and Percy's old rat." Philosopher's Stone. Wizarding charity, where it exists, is limited and inconsistent. For instance, the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare, SPEW, started by Hermione, is mocked, marginalized, and dismissed as frivolous or annoying by her peers. Instead of recognizing and supporting her noble cause, even her closest friends roll their eyes at her efforts, revealing a disturbing acceptance of oppression as a normal facet of magical society. Even during Voldemort's rise, the wizarding elite displays startling self-interest. While Harry, Ron, and Hermione risk their lives to protect others, wealthy wizarding families prioritize safeguarding their own fortunes. Instead of using their resources to help victims of dark magic or war, powerful families fortify their positions, protecting wealth rather than life. Money, once again, triumphs over morality. Ultimately, the harsh truth of the wizarding world's economy becomes clear. Wealth and magical power offer not only comfort but control, enabling systemic injustice to thrive unchecked. Magic, which could easily transform poverty, eliminate prejudice, and restore dignity to countless lives, is instead hoarded selfishly. As Sirius Black astutely remarks, if you want to know what a man's like, take a good look at how he treats his inferiors, not his equals. Goblet of Fire. Sadly, by this measure, the magical world's true character is undeniably cruel. Thus, beneath the dazzling surface of spells and enchantments, the wizarding community's most powerful magic remains tragically unused. The magic of empathy and kindness. Number 25. The lasting horror of the unforgivable curses. As children reading about the wizarding world, many of us understood the unforgivable curses merely as bad or forbidden. They seemed distant, safely confined within pages of magical fiction. However, growing up and revisiting those stories reveals a chilling realization. These curses bear terrifying, irreversible consequences, far beyond the simplistic notion of good and evil. Take the Imperious Curse, for instance. At first glance, it seems almost harmless, simply making another person follow one's orders. But the reality is much darker. Under Imperious, a person loses their sense of self, becoming a mere puppet whose mind can be twisted into acts they would never dream of committing consciously. Take, for example, the tragic case of Bartemius Crouch Jr. Controlled by his father for years through this curse, the young wizard became not just a victim, but eventually a perpetrator of heinous crimes. His own humanity faded beneath layers of manipulation, revealing just how deeply the Imperious Curse can corrupt one's essence. Many wizards during Voldemort's first rise, including respected figures like Lucius Malfoy, claimed after his initial defeat that they had acted under this curse. As Arthur Weasley bitterly remarked, loads of people claimed they'd only done you-know-who's bidding under the influence of the Imperious Curse, but how do we sort out the liars? This confusion and uncertainty became a shield for true collaborators, making justice impossible, forever blurring the line between victim and villain. Then there's the Cruciatus Curse. Reading the books, we imagined it as a brief but excruciating punishment. Yet, as adults, we realize the true extent of this torment. It doesn't simply inflict pain, it obliterates sanity itself, reducing its victims to hollow shells, stripped of their minds and personalities. Neville Longbottom's parents, Frank and Alice, are heartbreaking illustrations of this brutality. Bellatrix Lestrange's relentless torture condemned them to a living death, imprisoned in their own broken minds, forever trapped within the walls of St. Mungo's Hospital. Visiting his parents there, Neville's eyes reflect the unbearable tragedy of growing up in the shadow of such a crime. As Harry observes Neville pocketing a sweet wrapper from his mother, a tiny token of love from a woman who no longer recognizes her son, the haunting reality of Cruciatus truly sinks in. These were not abstract, distant victims, they were real, suffering people, robbed of their identities and their futures. Yet Neville's parents are hardly the only casualties of this curse. Lesser-known stories emerged after the war, whispered among survivors. Wizards and witches reduced to insanity, hidden from view by families desperate to avoid shame or sorrow. These nameless sufferers never found the recognition or sympathy afforded to Frank and Alice. Instead, they lived and died in obscurity, their stories buried by shame, stigma, and silence. These tragedies underline a grim truth. The Cruciatus Curse destroys far more than the individual. It devastates entire families and communities, leaving invisible scars that never fully heal. And finally, the killing curse, Avada Kedavra, whose eerie green flash marked so many dark moments throughout the Wizarding Wars. On the surface, it seems almost merciful. Instant death without pain or suffering, but its true horror lies precisely in its ruthless efficiency, its lack of traceable evidence, a killing without cause, without signs, leaving no wounds or magical marks, only lifeless bodies and unanswered questions. Consider the death of Cedric Diggory, an innocent victim caught in Voldemort's brutal return. When Cedric fell to Avada Kedavra, Harry could do nothing but watch helplessly, tormented by guilt and loss. Even more chillingly, during Voldemort's reign of terror, countless deaths by this curse remained unresolved. Without visible injuries or proof, perpetrators walked free, leaving families without closure or justice. Avada Kedavra, therefore, is not merely a curse. It is a weapon designed explicitly for murderers who wish to evade punishment. Yet, after Voldemort's final defeat at Hogwarts, Wizarding Society faced a curious paradox. Though universally condemned, the unforgivable curses were never fully outlawed. Instead, they remained hidden in the shadows, tacitly understood as forbidden, yet occasionally employed by auras or even respected wizards in moments of desperation. Harry Potter himself resorted to Imperius during the Gringotts break-in, justifying it as a necessary evil. Hermione Granger voiced unease, asking, "Harry, are you sure this is the only way?" To which Harry replied gravely, "We have no choice." Yet, such rationalizations hint at a dangerous reality. As long as these curses exist, their abuse is inevitable. Consider also the long-term psychological toll on those who wield such magic. Draco Malfoy, coerced into performing unforgivable acts during his 6th year at Hogwarts, forever carried emotional scars. Haunted by nightmares, his entire adult life was overshadowed by guilt and regret. Draco's story underscores another hidden danger. The use of dark magic does not leave its caster untouched. It corrupts from within, eroding morality and compassion, leaving behind only emptiness. Severus Snape's lifelong remorse after indirectly causing Lily Potter's death further illustrates this internal torment, one that he carried privately until his own tragic demise. Those who employ these curses willingly or unwillingly pay an irreversible price, losing pieces of themselves along the way. Another overlooked consequence is how society itself becomes complicit. The trials after Voldemort's fall revealed uncomfortable truths about collective morality. Dolores Umbridge notoriously claimed innocence, insisting she acted for the greater good. Many wizards, eager to return to normality, accepted such dubious justifications rather than confront their own culpability. The world isn't split into good people and Death Eaters, Sirius Black once wisely said, pointing out the moral ambiguity underlying Wizarding Society's casual tolerance of dark magic. By not explicitly banning these curses forever, society silently permitted future atrocities. The potential for abuse remained, lurking beneath superficial peace, waiting patiently for another opportunistic villain to rise. Perhaps the most alarming insight, though, is how easily these curses reflect real-world horrors. Imperius embodies totalitarian control, stripping free will and autonomy. Cruciatus mirrors the cruelty of torture, destroying minds in pursuit of power. And Avada Kedavra symbolizes the anonymity of political assassination and covert murders, leaving no evidence behind. J.K. Rowling, consciously or not, highlighted human evil at its most disturbing, providing young readers an unsettling window into darker aspects of our reality. Revisiting the stories in adulthood reveals that these spells are metaphors for very real human atrocities, making them even more terrifying. Moreover, as wizarding history repeatedly showed, dark magic always finds willing practitioners. Voldemort's defeat did not eliminate all evil, rather it drove it underground, temporarily suppressed, but never eradicated. Young wizards fascinated by forbidden knowledge, ambitious politicians willing to sacrifice morality for power, desperate individuals driven by vengeance, all remain potential candidates for unleashing these horrors once more. Unless explicitly forbidden and actively resisted by education and moral guidance, the curses persist, eternal temptations waiting for vulnerable or corrupted hearts. Albus Dumbledore, who spent his entire life confronting the seductive nature of power, famously stated, "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities." Yet, without clear prohibitions and consequences, how can future generations make informed choices? Without teaching the history, suffering, and moral consequences clearly, wizarding society inadvertently risks repeating past mistakes. The continued existence of unforgivable curses symbolizes a silent tolerance of evil, weakening the moral fabric of the entire magical world. In the end, the unforgivable curses remind us of a harsh truth. Evil does not vanish with a single victory. It lingers quietly in the shadows, always ready to resurface. It corrupts those who use it and devastates those who fall victim. Through stories like those of Frank and Alice Longbottom, Cedric Diggory, and even Draco Malfoy, readers learn the true cost of cruelty, control, and unchecked power. These curses remain too dangerous, too potent, to be left as moral ambiguities. As Harry Potter's own world demonstrated vividly, unless we confront the reality of evil directly, history inevitably repeats itself, and new horrors arise from the ashes of old ones. The unforgivable curses, terrifying in their potency, warn us all. Vigilance, awareness, and courage remain essential, lest the darkest chapters of wizarding history return to haunt us once more. Number 26. The Fate of Forgotten Hogwarts Students. At first glance, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry seems like a magical haven, a place of wonder where young witches and wizards learn, laugh, and grow together. Yet beneath the grand architecture, shifting staircases, and whimsical portraits, Hogwarts harbours its own shadowy mysteries, particularly when it comes to the forgotten fates of many students who once walked its halls. Behind the spectacular triumphs and heroic deeds celebrated by wizarding society lie hidden tales of those who silently faded into obscurity, students whose disappearances or deaths passed almost unnoticed. One poignant example is Colin Creevey, a student whose boundless enthusiasm and childlike admiration of Harry Potter were both endearing and unmistakable. Colin was introduced as a bright-eyed, eager young Gryffindor who arrived at Hogwarts carrying a camera, enchanted by the grandeur of magic itself. His enthusiasm was encapsulated in moments like his first interaction with Harry, where he excitedly proclaimed, "You're Harry Potter. Can I take your picture?" From that point onward, Colin made frequent appearances, popping into scenes with his constant camera clicks and unstoppable cheerfulness. Yet despite this endearing presence, Colin's fate during the Battle of Hogwarts was shockingly disregarded by many around him. He did not perish heroically before our eyes, nor did he receive an emotional goodbye. Instead, he died unseen, almost casually acknowledged only by passing mention, Colin Creevey. He was tiny in death, the books lament briefly, highlighting the chilling quietness of his final moment. There was no grand memorial, no communal mourning among the student body. His disappearance from life was accepted with haunting ease. Colin's fate isn't isolated. It echoes the fate of other students whose presence quietly dwindled over time without closure. Take the example of Lavender Brown, whose loud personality and tumultuous romantic life were prominent in the 6th book, only for her storyline to come abruptly to an uncertain end. In the film adaptation, Lavender is shown to be attacked by the werewolf Fenrir Greyback during the Battle of Hogwarts, but her ultimate fate remains frustratingly ambiguous in the text. There was no definitive line confirming whether she lived or died. Instead, her story simply trails off, leaving readers with a nagging sense of incompleteness. The uncertainty surrounding Lavender's fate speaks volumes about Hogwarts itself, a place simultaneously full of warmth, yet strangely capable of forgetting its own. Consider the Patil twins, Padma and Parvati, both integral characters who participated in key events, such as the Yule Ball, yet their presence faded steadily as the final battles approached. They fought bravely alongside their classmates, risking everything against Voldemort's forces, yet after the smoke cleared, neither received more than cursory recognition. The books never clarify how deeply these traumatic experiences impacted their later lives. Did they ever recover emotionally from the horrors of war? Were their names remembered, honored, or did their brave deeds fade quietly into the background, overshadowed by Harry's glory? Or reflect upon Susan Bones, the Hufflepuff girl, whose family endured repeated tragedies inflicted by Voldemort's regime. The death of her uncle Edgar Bones at the hands of Death Eaters was publicly acknowledged, but Susan herself fades away without explicit closure, her fate never conclusively addressed. After enduring trauma and loss throughout her youth, readers never learn how Susan coped with such relentless grief, or if she even survived the climactic war. The narrative moved swiftly forward, leaving behind questions about the less prominent casualties of Voldemort's tyranny. Similarly, the curious case of Hannah Abbott remains unresolved. She was known as a quiet, gentle Hufflepuff who suffered profound tragedy when her mother was murdered by Death Eaters during her 6th year. Hannah was devastated, but the story of her recovery or survival in the final battle was never fully depicted in the pages. We see her briefly fighting alongside her classmates, yet her emotional journey beyond grief and her ultimate destiny remain untold. Did Hannah find healing after the war, or was she just another name lost to the cruel silence of Hogwarts' collective memory? Another disturbing oversight involves Marietta Edgecombe, the Ravenclaw student who betrayed Dumbledore's army. Readers remember vividly the word sneak spelled out cruelly in boils across her face, a punishment devised by Hermione Granger's magical jinx. But what became of Marietta afterward? Her betrayal ostracized her socially and undoubtedly left permanent psychological scars, yet her ultimate fate is quietly omitted. She never returns to the forefront, her life thereafter unknown and largely forgotten by readers, reflecting once again Hogwarts' capacity for both heroism and quiet neglect. Hogwarts' tendency to forget or gloss over its own lost children becomes even more unsettling when considering Dennis Creevey, Colin's younger brother. Introduced as even smaller and more vulnerable than his enthusiastic sibling, Dennis was thrust into a brutal war at an alarmingly young age. Following Colin's death, the emotional toll on Dennis must have been tremendous, yet Rowling never reveals what became of him afterward. Did Dennis manage to rebuild his life, or did he fall victim to lasting grief and isolation? That Hogwarts left this poignant story untold speaks volumes about the silence surrounding its forgotten students. Equally troubling is the story, or rather lack thereof, of Terry Boot, Anthony Goldstein, and Michael Corner Ravenclaw students who were briefly visible as brave members of Dumbledore's army. These students participated courageously in resisting Umbridge's regime and later battled Voldemort's forces, yet their subsequent lives were neither explored nor remembered. The war's casualties weren't confined only to the physical. Surely the psychological impact must have been profound, but their personal journeys beyond these harrowing battles vanished into narrative oblivion. A similar sense of loss surrounds the memory of Justin Finch Fletchley, a once prominent Hufflepuff student who faced petrification during the Chamber of Secrets incident and later fought bravely in the Battle of Hogwarts. Justin's rich character background, a Muggle-born wizard targeted by prejudice and violence, made him particularly vulnerable during Voldemort's rise. Yet the books never disclose how he coped with the trauma afterward, nor if he ever fully reconciled the horror and prejudice he faced. Did Justin recover, or was his future yet another forgotten tale, lost beneath the grandeur of Hogwarts' victories? Even characters like Lee Jordan, who brought levity through his spirited commentary on Quidditch matches, disappear without further mention following the final battle. Lee had bravely continued broadcasting underground resistance through Potterwatch, but after the war's conclusion, his voice vanished without acknowledgement. Did Lee ever achieve closure or recognition for his brave contributions, or was his courage also quietly forgotten as life resumed normalcy? Cho Chang, whose personal tragedy of losing Cedric Diggory to Voldemort's cruelty was a major emotional subplot, likewise faded quietly. After her brief romantic connection to Harry Potter, Cho fought bravely alongside her peers, yet the books never mention her fate afterward. Did Cho ever overcome the deep emotional scars left by witnessing death firsthand? Or did Hogwarts simply move forward, leaving her personal struggles buried beneath collective silence? Eloise Midgen, another minor but memorable student frequently mentioned for her ill-fated attempts to remedy her acne magically, vanished completely from the narrative. Was Eloise a casualty of Voldemort's brutality, or did she quietly slip away from Hogwarts, traumatized by the school's increasingly dangerous climate? Her sudden absence is another overlooked chapter in the school's hidden history of loss and neglect. These examples are not isolated but represent a troubling pattern at Hogwarts. The school, despite its aura of warmth and family-like camaraderie, possessed a chilling ability to forget its own when they were no longer in the spotlight. Students who weren't directly connected to Harry Potter's heroic narrative risked slipping into obscurity, their stories quietly extinguished. Perhaps this forgetfulness reflects a deeper commentary about war itself, its ability to diminish individual tragedies in the shadow of grand narratives. Hogwarts, though magical, could not escape this harsh reality. Behind its stone walls and glowing torches, students like Colin, Lavender, Hannah, and countless others faced loss, grief, trauma, and obscurity, often quietly and invisibly. Their stories, rich in emotional depth and human struggle, were subsumed beneath the legend of the Chosen One. Ultimately, remembering these forgotten students forces readers to reconsider Hogwarts not merely as a place of enchantment, but as a place of poignant and painful truths. These vanished or forgotten students represent an unspoken sacrifice, a hidden emotional toll exacted by the war against Voldemort, haunting reminders that even the most magical places are marked irrevocably by human tragedy. Hogwarts may have triumphed in its battle against darkness, but in doing so, it quietly left behind the silent casualties whose stories we must now finally acknowledge. Number 27, the Forbidden Forest is a death trap for students. To a child's imagination, the Forbidden Forest bordering Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry embodies all the mystique and adventurous allure of a magical education. But peel away the whimsical layers, and what lies beneath is a terrifying realm, teeming with lethal creatures that any responsible adult would deem utterly unsuitable for young students. One cannot help but wonder how Hogwarts professors, entrusted with children's safety, repeatedly justified sending students into a place so inherently dangerous. From the very first novel, when young Harry Potter and Draco Malfoy found themselves serving detention within its shadowy confines, readers should have realized the forest was not merely forbidden, it was deadly. Consider the night that Harry, Draco, Neville, and Hermione were disciplined for wandering out after dark in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Professor McGonagall, stern yet seemingly fair, handed down the punishment of spending the night patrolling the Forbidden Forest alongside Hagrid. As if a midnight stroll through an untamed woodland were not dangerous enough, these first years were explicitly sent on a mission to locate a creature responsible for killing unicorns, a feat that should be unsettling even for seasoned adult wizards. Neville's palpable fear upon hearing the assignment underscores the absurdity of the punishment. "The forest," he squeaked, voice cracking under terror. "I thought that was forbidden." Neville's reaction wasn't mere childish timidity. It was entirely rational given the peril lurking beyond the tree line. Hagrid, beloved by students but notoriously oblivious to real-world dangers, was entrusted to guide this expedition. His judgment, famously flawed when assessing the threat level of magical creatures, made the situation worse. "There's nothing that lives in the forest that'll hurt you if you're with me or Fang," he assured them in his booming, comforting voice. Yet readers recall all too vividly that Fang was labelled a coward by Hagrid himself, reducing the guard against the unknown to an excitable half-giant and his terrified dog. Such assurances ring hollow when moments later Harry and Draco were alone, faced with a cloaked figure, later revealed as Voldemort himself, feeding upon a unicorn. This nightmarish encounter alone should have permanently shut down the practice of sending vulnerable first years into the forest, yet Hogwarts' lax approach to student safety remained bafflingly unaltered. As Harry's years progressed, the forest's dark reputation became increasingly justified, transforming from a place of punishment to a venue for what Hogwarts labelled education. Hagrid, promoted inexplicably to care of magical creatures professor, repeatedly saw fit to lead students directly into harm's way. In Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Hagrid introduced his class to hippogriffs at the forest's edge, majestic creatures indeed, yet known for their deadly pride and razor-sharp talons. Students watched with wide eyes as Harry bravely bowed before Buckbeak, narrowly escaping harm, while Draco Malfoy, arrogant and careless, suffered a brutal injury. "You're not dangerous at all, are you?" Malfoy taunted mockingly before being slashed across the arm. Despite Malfoy's provocative behavior, the school's failure was evident, allowing adolescents close proximity to creatures capable of fatal violence reflected a reckless disregard for student safety. Yet, hippogriffs were tame compared to some other denizens lurking deeper within the forbidden forest. Acromantulas, giant spiders bred originally by Hagrid himself, had established a vast colony within the forest's depths. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, readers experienced firsthand the terror of these creatures when Harry and Ron became unwilling visitors to Aragog, the Acromantula patriarch. "My sons and daughters do not harm Hagrid on my command," Aragog explained ominously. "But I cannot deny them fresh meat when it wanders so willingly into our midst." These words chilled the blood, reinforcing how easily a student could become nothing more than food. Hagrid's affectionate blindness to the real dangers of his beloved pets placed students in grave jeopardy. If even the spiders admitted a willingness to devour children, what rationale remained for allowing students near the forest at all? The centaurs, another dominant species within the forest, provided further evidence of the risks Hogwarts willingly ignored. Though portrayed as wise beings who read stars and prophecies, centaurs openly distrusted humans and preferred isolation. Their hostility toward outsiders, particularly wizards, was evident in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, when Professor Umbridge foolishly trespassed upon their territory. Captured, terrified, and eventually traumatized, Umbridge's fate was unclear yet undoubtedly severe. Centaur leader Megorian stated firmly, "Our ways are not yours, nor are our laws. You have no business here." His unyielding tone made clear the danger humans faced merely by setting foot within Centaur territory. That Hogwarts professors continued sending children into their proximity demonstrates either arrogant negligence or disturbing indifference to the well-being of their students. Even during less overtly violent encounters, the forest posed psychological threats that should have disqualified it from serving as a classroom or detention hall. Luna Lovegood, in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, casually remarked, "There are many things in here that humans cannot understand." Luna, uniquely perceptive and resilient, might weather such encounters without permanent damage, but most students risked psychological trauma from exposure to mysteries beyond their comprehension. Harry himself experienced the forest's chilling influence firsthand, frequently haunted by visions and dark memories triggered by its oppressive gloom. A place that continually left scars, whether physical or emotional, could hardly be justified as an educational tool. Moreover, Hogwarts staff repeatedly demonstrated irresponsible complacency toward the dangers of lycanthropy within the Forbidden Forest. Remus Lupin, a beloved teacher but also a werewolf, inadvertently illustrated how easily a seemingly controlled situation could spiral into life-threatening peril. In Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Lupin, despite meticulous preparation, ultimately transformed near the forest and endangered Harry, Hermione, Ron, and Sirius. The incident revealed how thin the barrier between safety and mortal danger truly was at Hogwarts, especially near the Forbidden Forest. That students were allowed, and often encouraged, to explore areas rife with werewolf sightings further underscores the institution's baffling recklessness. Perhaps the most shocking negligence involved allowing Voldemort himself to repeatedly infiltrate the forest's shadowy boundaries undetected. The first-year incident was horrifying enough, yet Voldemort's continued presence nearby, culminating in the climactic moments of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, should have prompted urgent measures to protect students. Instead, students like Harry and his friends regularly ventured into the forest, often unsupervised and dangerously unprepared. Dumbledore, known for his wisdom and careful planning, strangely allowed the forest to remain a persistent blind spot in security. The result was a final confrontation that could have easily claimed dozens more innocent lives, highlighting the administration's dangerously cavalier attitude toward student safety. Looking back, the continued presence of the Forbidden Forest on Hogwarts grounds remains deeply troubling. How many close calls must occur before a place loses its quaint charm and gains rightful recognition as a death trap? The forest was home to monsters, murderers, and malevolent magic, yet staff routinely encouraged or forced students to brave its terrors. That Hogwarts did not experience constant tragedy is owed purely to luck or fate, rather than prudent oversight by responsible adults. Indeed, the Forbidden Forest symbolizes a far darker reality lurking behind Hogwarts' walls, the institution's casual willingness to gamble with students' lives under the guise of bravery, education, or discipline. While adventures in a magical school might captivate readers' imaginations, the reality, as revealed by the very pages we cherish, shows an astonishing disregard for student welfare. We remember Harry's courage, Hermione's brilliance, and Ron's loyalty, but perhaps we should equally remember the dangerous negligence of a school that repeatedly put children face to face with nightmares. In the end, readers must confront an uncomfortable truth. Hogwarts' beloved Forbidden Forest was not merely forbidden. It was a testament to a troubling philosophy in wizard education, one that valued adventure and bravery over children's safety. It's truly miraculous and deeply unsettling that more students did not perish in the shadows beneath its haunted trees. Number 28, the Vanishing Cabinet and the possibility of trapped souls. The Vanishing Cabinet first appears innocuous enough, a curious piece of furniture resting quietly in the shadowy confines of Borgin and Berks. It's easy for any witch or wizard to overlook the subtle menace that lingers behind its polished doors. Yet as J.K. Rowling reveals in Half-Blood Prince, the cabinet holds a profoundly darker secret. When broken or malfunctioning, it can imprison a human being inside its liminal space, possibly for eternity. This revelation becomes dreadfully clear with the unfortunate case of Graham Montague, the Slytherin Quidditch captain, whose experience paints a horrifying picture of the cabinet's potential dangers. Montague's terrifying ordeal unfolds vividly in Order of the Phoenix, where Fred and George Weasley, notorious for their pranks, thrust him carelessly into the cabinet, unaware of its defective state. For days afterward, Montague remains lost, vanishing from the castle grounds without a trace. When he eventually reappears, he's discovered jammed inside a toilet, delirious, babbling frantically about emptiness, darkness, and an endless void. Fellow students recount him screaming incoherently, his eyes wild with terror, murmuring repeatedly about limbo and nothingness. Draco Malfoy later casually notes, "Montague told me he was stuck in limbo or something, ruling Half-Blood Prince." Malfoy's tone is dismissive, but Montague's harrowing experience speaks volumes about the cabinet's disturbing capabilities. This horrifying event compels us to imagine, was Montague alone in his entrapment? Could others before him have fallen victim to the same chilling fate? Perhaps the cabinet, deceptively benign on its exterior, has a history soaked in silent suffering. The possibility is chillingly plausible given the long history of magical artifacts being carelessly misused. Consider how many forgotten faces might have vanished throughout the centuries, wizards or witches whose disappearances remain unsolved, left forever trapped in the cabinet's spectral grasp. Suppose a young witch named Eleanor Carmichael wandered into Borgin and Burke's in 1863, exploring Knockturn Alley, as adventurous teenagers often did. Drawn by curiosity, Eleanor might have climbed innocently inside the cabinet to hide during a childhood game. When her friends searched for her, calling her name throughout the murky streets, they would find nothing. Time would pass, and her disappearance would become nothing more than a tragic footnote, a cautionary tale whispered among mothers and grandmothers to their children. Stay away from Knockturn Alley, or you'll vanish like Eleanor Carmichael. Inside the cabinet, Eleanor's experience would be similar to Montague's, but infinitely more prolonged and torturous. Her initial confusion would give way to panic as she pushed desperately against wooden doors that refused to open. Minutes would feel like hours, hours would stretch into days, until eventually she would lose track of time altogether, falling into the maddening rhythm of eternity. Darkness and silence would become her companions, and her mind, seeking solace, would slowly begin to fragment under the strain. When Montague later described feeling trapped in the nothingness, could he have briefly shared the same tormenting space as Eleanor, a fellow prisoner lost to memory? Adding weight to this haunting speculation, Professor Dumbledore himself once noted in a conversation with Harry that magical objects could sometimes contain traces of those who came into contact with them. Dumbledore mentioned, "Magic always leaves a trace, Harry, an imprint of those who came before, Half-Blood Prince." His words hint at something profound. Perhaps Montague's panicked ramblings about hearing whispers and feeling an unseen presence were not mere delusions, but rather a fleeting encounter with lingering traces of souls who never found escape. The cabinet's magical mechanics remain enigmatic and its true origins murky. What we know from the books is that its purpose was originally benign. One cabinet links magically to another, providing instant transportation. Draco Malfoy used this very mechanism to breach Hogwarts' defenses in Half-Blood Prince, proving the cabinet's powerful capabilities when properly functioning. But when broken or tampered with, it ceases to serve its intended purpose. Instead of safely transferring occupants between two fixed points, the broken cabinet traps them, holding them suspended between locations. They exist neither fully here nor entirely there, caught between worlds. Exactly as Montague described, "I was nowhere." Everything was empty. Montague's mental state after emerging was disturbing enough to prompt speculation about the cabinet's ability to warp human consciousness. Madame Pomfrey reported that he suffered severe confusion, delirium, and extreme psychological distress, symptoms consistent with prolonged isolation or sensory deprivation. Even Hermione Granger, known for her rational explanations, appeared deeply unsettled, remarking quietly to Ron, "Imagine being trapped in absolute nothingness, Ron." That would drive anyone mad. Her words underscore the severe trauma inflicted upon victims like Montague and perhaps Eleanor before him. Given Hogwarts' vast and ancient history, it seems plausible that similar cabinets or artifacts may have existed in other times and places, each potentially trapping individuals in a similarly nightmarish state. Magical objects have long histories and are known to change hands frequently, often without proper caution. The Vanishing Cabinet itself changed ownership numerous times, passing unnoticed through indifferent hands, each unaware of its deadly secret. Borgin and Burkes, known for trading in dubious magical goods, never hesitated to sell dangerous items to the highest bidder, regardless of the potential harm. Historians of the wizarding world like Bathilda Bagshot note that Nocturne Alley has a dark history marked by disappearances and unexplained phenomena. Could the cabinet have been responsible for some of these mysterious vanishings, silently claiming souls through the decades, leaving behind only grief and unanswered questions? Such scenarios conjure chilling imagery. Families searching desperately for lost loved ones, never imagining their cries echoed endlessly within the walls of a magical prison they could neither see nor imagine. Moreover, Harry himself observed how dark magic has a tendency to linger and leave indelible scars. He once reflected, after his battle with Voldemort at the Ministry of Magic, evil leaves traces. It never truly disappears. If such profound darkness can linger in physical spaces, it is conceivable that it could also imprison and hold captive a person's very essence. The Vanishing Cabinet may represent a physical manifestation of this deeper magical principle, capturing not just bodies but souls, holding them suspended in perpetual torment. Rowling's meticulous attention to magical details throughout her narrative lends additional credibility to the idea that the cabinet might harbor lost souls. She carefully constructed magical laws within her universe, laws which, once violated, often resulted in catastrophic consequences. Montague's brief imprisonment alone is a stark example of this. How much worse, then, would be the fate of those who never escaped? The haunting idea of eternal imprisonment aligns disturbingly with the broader themes Rowling explored throughout the series: mortality, the fear of the unknown, and the consequences of magical recklessness. Sirius Black warned Harry, "The world isn't split into good people and Death Eaters. We've all got both light and dark inside us." The cabinet stands as a chilling symbol of this darkness, waiting silently, eternally patient, ready to ensnare the unsuspecting. Even more tragically, we might imagine the cabinet occasionally granting brief, ghostly visions of freedom, tantalizing its captives with momentary glimpses of a world just beyond their reach. Perhaps Montague's sudden reappearance in a toilet was not just luck, but an agonizing tease from a cruel, malfunctioning magic, offering the possibility of escape only to snatch it cruelly away again. Montague himself spoke vaguely of these moments, muttering half-coherent phrases. "I saw doors, light, corridors, but always out of reach." The fate of such trapped souls might have remained hidden if not for the accidental rescue of Montague. His escape revealed just enough information to tantalize and horrify observers, forcing us to confront the unsettling truth behind the seemingly harmless piece of magical furniture. Yet even Montague's rescue was incomplete. While his body was freed, his mind was permanently scarred, forever bearing the imprint of the cabinet's dark magic. Ultimately, Rowling leaves readers with a chilling, open-ended question: what else, or who else, remains trapped inside the cabinet's eternal void, unheard and forgotten? She invites readers to ponder the invisible victims of magical carelessness, whose silent screams echo through eternity, trapped by enchantments beyond their understanding. The Vanishing Cabinet, a mere prop in the grand drama of Hogwarts, thus becomes a haunting metaphor, a terrifying reminder of magic's unpredictable, shadowy potential, capable of condemning innocent souls to eternal darkness and silence.